the Artemis II mission is a great step forward for human spaceflight because this is our first crewed mission of this plan that's eventually going to put people on the moon for long term. Uh, mission was only about 12 days long, and a bunch of that was the trip there and the trip back. And so we want people to stay on the moon for much longer than that, something more like how we've had astronauts on the International Space Station for long periods of time. And so this really successful mission, this really successful test of all of those systems that are necessary for us to do that is a really, really great indicator that, we're getting ready to take that next step.
Absolutely. Now, this crew has traveled hundreds of thousands of miles and went even further from Earth than the Apollo 13 went. So what does this tell us about the capabilities of the Orion spacecraft and what NASA's plans long term?
Yeah, so this tells us that pretty much everything was working the way we expected it to. They did have a few technical glitches. Their email systems weren't quite working. They had some problems with the toilet, things like that. But in general, the big stuff all worked exactly like it was supposed to. They got around the moon, they got all the data they were supposed to get, and they came back. And so that tells us that we're ready for the next step. We're ready to start preparing those landing things that are going to land people on the moon the next time.
And if you're just joining us right now, we're talking with Dr. McKenna Wood, an astrophysicist who directs the Saunders Planetarium and the Digital Dome over at the Museum of Science and Innovation in Tampa. What does this mean for the next generation of scientists? Everyone's watching right now. Kids are watching. Families are watching. Everyone wants to see this go as smoothly as possible. So what does this mean to that next generation?
Yeah, I hope what it means for the next generation is that they are inspired and they are reminded of what exactly we as humans can do and what they specifically can do when we put our hearts and our minds to it. It's been really inspiring in the planetarium over the last week and a half since the launch. I think I've seen at least one kid in an astronaut costume every single day that we've been there. And so I think that people are taking away that message. I think that they are being inspired and excited about this mission to the moon.
And I think maybe our stream may have started a little bit late. So I want to ask one more time. The first question I asked you, which is to walk us through that final phase. What actually happens from the moment Orion hits Earth's atmosphere when it splashes down?
Yeah, so that final phase is going to start at about 7:53 p.m., which is when they're going to first impact the atmosphere and first get that interference from the atmosphere. At that point, they'll still be 400,000 feet above the surface, and they are going to very quickly heat up that spacecraft as it's moving very, very quickly and is now experiencing friction from the atmosphere around it. So the spacecraft is going to heat up. It's going to reach over 5,000 degrees. And while it's that hot, we're actually going to lose communication with the astronauts. That'll be about the first 6 or so minutes of that 13-minute descent. And then after that, they're going to have slowed down a lot. They're going to be about halfway through the descent part. And then the next really important stage is going to be that parachute deployment. And there are 11 different chutes on the Orion capsule, which will deploy in several different stages. The last and biggest of those chutes, the main chutes, will deploy when they're only about 5,000 feet above the surface. And those chutes are huge. There's 3 of them, and they're each over 100 feet in diameter. So those are going to take the capsule down in its last stage, slow it all the way down until it's moving less than 20 miles an hour to actually hit the ocean.
Yeah, and those are the parachutes that everyone, I think, is used to seeing that were, have become sort of synonymous with the splashdown, right?
Yeah, those big orange striped parachutes that we're used to seeing.
Oh, let me ask you that question one more time. You had mentioned some of the risks and some of the things that make you more nervous. So what are those things that make you more nervous? How confident are you that this is going to go off without a hitch, like we all hope it does?
Yeah. So some of the things that make me nervous, make the NASA engineers nervous, make probably the astronauts a little bit nervous are, those chute deployments, all of the last final adjustments as they're coming through to make sure they're lined up exactly where they want to land in the Pacific. And then those four different stages of parachute deployment, starting with the forward bay parachutes, and then the drogue parachutes, and then the pilot parachutes, and then the main parachutes. So we want every stage of that to go just like it's planned to make sure that they slow down to that less than 20-mile-per-hour speed before they hit the ocean. And, I have high confidence in NASA. Every part of this has already been tested many, many times without humans on board, including in the Artemis I launch, which was back in 2022. And all of it has passed all of those tests successfully, which is why NASA felt confident enough to send our astronauts up there and ensure that we could bring them home safely.
All right, Dr. Wood, thank you so much for joining us here. I really do appreciate the time. You've talked to us in the past also about this same topic, about everything space related. So you have such incredible insight, and I appreciate you taking some time tonight. And enjoy watching this. It's going to be incredible.
It's going to be great. I love talking space.
I can tell.
Thank you for having me.
All right, take care. And keep those kids interested, too. We need them to keep this going, right?
Oh, for sure.
All right, thank you so much. And we're going to take a live look out here at NASA's feed again. And there it is right there. Let's listen into what's going on here, what NASA has on their end and what they're doing as they plan for this splashdown, which is now going to take place in just over an hour, scheduled for about 8:07 p.m. Let's listen in.
It's just coming along great.
Yeah. It's really nice to see. We did see some of those boats float behind us. We were hoping to give you a live view, but of course they floated right out of the camera shot as you came to us. But so basically the team right now here on the ship, basically like monitoring mode, but really things will pick up about 15 minutes after splashdown.
Yeah, so a couple minutes before splashdown, things start happening really, really fast. Some events during the reentry, they're maybe a second or two apart, and so it just takes a whole lot of effort and a lot of updates back and forth between us and Houston to try to keep track of everything that's happening, all in real time. And then after splashdown, that's when the recovery team really kicks into high gear. We have our boat teams, our boat crews going out, our divers doing hazardous assessments as they get progressively closer to the capsule, making sure it's safe for all of our people to go in, and it's also safe for the astronauts to come out, because really at the end of the day, that's what we're here for, is we're to make sure that the astronauts get home safe after their tremendous journey to the moon and back. But then also we have, like you mentioned on a minute ago, all of our imagery helicopters are taking imagery, camera shots of it as it's coming in all the way through splashdown. I mean, they'll see it as soon as it crosses the horizon, all the way to the ocean here.
And then afterwards, we have to recover actually Orion to bring it into the well deck of the ship.
Absolutely, yeah. And so once the astronauts are safe on board, then those same dive teams are going to transition into securing the capsule. They'll position some equipment around it to kind of facilitate that. The ship will move into position. We'll attach a really big winch line to it, and then a bunch of tending lines. We'll pull the capsule around behind the ship and then start to slowly bring it in. And then, Orion comes in, goes hard down, and everyone cheers.
Yeah,
great day.
Great day, exactly. Lots to coordinate, a lot to manage. Basically planning for this recovery, Artemis II recovery, started a month after Artemis I launched. That was the uncrewed test flight of the Space Launch System rocket, as well as the Orion spacecraft. That was November 2022, a month later, all the planning for this. How does it feel to be so close to welcoming our friends, our astronauts home?
I mean, for the whole team, I walked around the ship this morning just kind of visiting with a lot of people, a lot of groups, and just kind of get the feel of them. And everyone has that same kind of mentality. Everyone's excited. Everyone's thrilled to see all that work that's we've been doing, like you said, for the last 3 years, since right after the last one came back till now. And some people even further back. Some of them go back a decade or more. So everyone is just excited, and they're ready. They're really ready for this, and just to be able to see our crew come back, that's going to be a thrill for everyone.
How are you feeling? Are you ready? Is this something you ever thought you'd be doing?
I'm ready. I'm excited. This has been the pinnacle of my career so far. It really has. I've seen a lot of firsts, a lot of lasts, but I can't think of ever topping seeing the first crew to go to the moon and back in 50 years, and to be here and be a part of that. And it's just a tremendous privilege. And I'm on behalf of the whole team. I'm thrilled, and so are all of us. We're ready.
Yeah, I definitely think that those words really embody how everybody on the ship is feeling. So thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate you being here. And so, Rob, we'll toss it back to you again. We will continue to join you with live updates from the ship as much as possible.
All right, you're listening in to a live feed from NASA as the crew of the Artemis II is preparing for its re-entry and splashdown. What you just heard there was a live interview, I think, with one of the pilots of one of the MH-60S Seahawk helicopters that's stationed on the USS Mertha, which is off the coast of San Diego. And it's going to be the ship that goes out and pulls these astronauts out of the water after they have splashed down, which again is scheduled to happen at around 8:07 this evening. For now, we're going to take you back here live at the Fox 13 Plus set here in the Fox 13 newsroom. I'm Aaron Mesmer. I'm going to be your host for the next, let's say, I don't know, 45 minutes or so. Then we're going to have Mark and Allie step in, and they're going to take over. But we're going to take a quick break, and coming up after this, we're going to talk with another expert on space travel, on what this does to the human body, being that far from Earth and into outer space. So keep it right here. We have a lot of coverage on the Artemis II's return to Earth coming up after this. Welcome back to Fox 13 Plus. You're still listening to Aaron Mesmer. We are listening in right now, again, live with the crew of the Artemis II as they approach re-entry to Earth's atmosphere and eventually splashing down off the coast of San Diego in the Pacific Ocean. We're going to listen in live right now to hear what they're talking about, and as I believe they're communicating right now with Mission Control. So let's listen in live.
Comprehensive medical exams. They will spend a period of time yet to be determined on board the USS John Mertha before they are flown by helicopter to the shore in San Diego, to the San Diego Naval Air Station, and ultimately will board a NASA jet for the flight back to the Johnson Space Center here in Houston. Just to recap some of the key times that are coming up, we are expecting the separation of the crew module from the service module just 43 minutes from now. That is expected to occur at 6:33 p.m. Central Time, 7:33 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be followed just 4 minutes later by the crew module raise burn. The use of Integrity's thrusters one final time in a 19-second burn to slightly tilt the vehicle up into the correct orientation or angle of attack to ensure that it enters the Earth's atmosphere at the right angle, if you will. That will help deflect the buildup of heat against Integrity's heat shield. This was a deliberate move, a change in the procedures from the Artemis I mission that resulted in unexpected char loss on the Avcoat heat shield that had not been intended based on the entry trajectory for the Artemis I mission. What we're doing is we deliberately changed the trajectory of the entry from a skip entry that was about a 3,000-mile transit across the Pacific Ocean. We are expecting now from entry interface to the point of splashdown to have a range of just 1,701 nautical miles, and that in of itself will reduce the exposure time of heating on the heat shield of the spacecraft. Once the raise burn is complete, then the stage is set for entry interface at 6:53 and 31 seconds p.m. Central Time. That means that Integrity will be entering the Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of 400,000 feet, traveling at about 34,882 feet per second, heading for its splashdown site off the coast of San Diego, as you just heard from Megan Cruz on the deck of the USS John Murtha. Splashdown once again under those three main parachutes is expected at 7:07 and 8 seconds p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time, 2.5 hours before sunset. The actual total distance traveled for Integrity from launch to splashdown is estimated at 694,481 statute miles. Now that includes the first high elliptical Earth orbit following launch that enabled Integrity to move to 43,000 miles above the Earth at its apogee and enabling a 24-hour period of systems checkout.
And we're going to bring in right now Dr. Manny Urquette. He's Vice Chair for Aerospace Medicine at UCF's College of Medicine. Dr. Urquette, first of all, thanks so much for joining us. I just wanted to ask you, we've talked in the past about the impact of deep space on the human body. What is the impact now of re-entry on these four astronauts?
Yeah, thank you for having me again. Well, I think that the two most dynamic phases in spaceflight, both from an engineering but also from a human perspective, are definitely launch and landing or reentry. And this is when G loads or gravity forces get increased. But I think from a human standpoint, particularly more is splashdown and reentry. Just imagine, these astronauts have been for almost 10 days in zero gravity. So their bodies have partially adapted to living in a zero gravity environment, free floating. Basically, they can lift anything without making any effort from their muscles and bones. And once they start re-entering the atmosphere, they will go from 0 Gs, that means with their bodies basically weighing 0 pounds, to 3.9 or 4 Gs. That means that immediately they go from, just assume that someone is 100 pounds, just for an example. They go from weighing 0 pounds to weighing 400 pounds, right? Equivalent of 400 pounds if it's for gravity loads. So this has a tremendous impact on how that feels from a physiologic perspective. And then once they splash down, they're going to be in the middle of the ocean, close to the coast. But all the swaying from the ocean is going to start getting them possibly some nausea and some vomit. In some cases, these are professional astronauts. Some of them, they get, some medications to prevent that. But regardless, they're going to feel a little bit perhaps nauseous with all of this movement. So this is one of the most physiologically impactful phases of spaceflight, not only for Artemis II, but pretty much for any other spaceflight mission that lands in the ocean.
At the beginning of our broadcast here, we talked a little bit about the intense G-forces that they're going to experience on the way in. It's essentially almost 4G, I believe. Is that correct? And what is the impact? What's the impact there on the human body as they're experiencing that?
Yeah, these are just transient forces, right? It only gets experienced, when they enter the atmosphere, and once the parachutes deploy, basically they go from 4Gs to 1G, which is the normal gravity load that we all experience. Then they're going to be again going through the swaying of the ocean. Then they're going to be recovered back into the ship. Then some of the NASA flight surgeons are going to make sure they're fine. They're going to run some physical exams. Then once they're ready, they're going to fly them by helicopter back to the coast, and then eventually fly them on a Gulfstream back to Houston. And all of these are changes in the human body back to adapting to one gravity. So the astronauts are going to have perhaps for a few days, a week or so, some trouble walking on a straight line, keeping their balance, because again, you're transitioning from 0G for up to 10 days, basically free floating in space, not relying on your senses to know where is up, down, left, right, front, and back, to then yet again going back to a ground gravity environment. All your systems, so your brain, your ears, and your eyes, and basically your muscles have to adapt again to live in a ground gravity environment, and it takes several days to adapt back to 1G. So we're going to be seeing these transitions back to Earth life, as we call it, and this is incredibly exciting.
What is it going to feel like for these astronauts, when they hit the water? And you just said they're not going to be able to move around right away normally, especially even after the pilots come out and rescue them and pull them out of the capsule. What's it going to be like for them just getting back on their feet with Earth's gravity for the first time?
Yeah, well, they haven't been in space too long to fully adapt to space. Usually it takes about 6 weeks or so for most of the human systems in the body to adapt to spaceflight. These astronauts have only been in space for 10 days, roughly 10 days. So not all of the systems have been fully adapted to space, which means that they will then be able to adapt faster back to Earth's gravity and back to Earth physiology. So, from that perspective, this is not going to be as abrupt as we would see from astronauts that have been, for example, on the space station for 6 months to a year. Those astronauts have a little bit more trouble adapting back to a ground gravity environment, back to Earth.
And, when people are watching the splashdown, what do they need to understand about what the astronauts just put their bodies through for the last 10 days?
Yeah, I mean, the human body is incredibly resilient to change. These 4 astronauts are, incredibly healthy. They have been training for all their lives for this mission. And what we're seeing is, a true resiliency in the human body. And we're seeing how the human physiology and all of our systems are terrific adapting to change. And, these humans have been free floating in space, basically carrying no weight in their muscles, their bones, their limbs. And they're going to have to adapt to getting back to a one gravity environment where actually, if you want to lift something, it has some effort from you to lift it. So I'm just really looking forward to seeing them splashing down.
All right, Dr. Urqueta, thank you so much for joining us here once again. We've talked to you a couple times over the last couple of weeks throughout the Artemis II's mission to space and now back to Earth. So thanks so much for lending your expertise. I bet this is not going to be the last time we talk, because there's a couple more Artemis missions that are planned for the next couple of years.
Absolutely. If you want to talk about spaceflight, just call me. I'm ready.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate it. Enjoy watching this from home.
Thank you. You as well.
All right, take care. All right, we're going to take another live look here at the live feed from NASA and where they are right now. It appears as though they're doing a live interview with a pilot on the deck of the USS John Murtha. This is the ship that's going to go out into the Pacific after the splashdown and help rescue these astronauts and welcome them back to Earth. Let's listen in live to what this interview is going on right now on NASA.
So they're able to do squats, deadlifts, different things, not dissimilar to what the ISS astronauts do, but with a lot less room to do it. And they also did rowing activities for cardiovascular health, and the crews loved it. But for the lunar crews, the future lunar crews, maintaining that physical conditioning, which our astronaut strength conditioning rehabilitation specialists, affectionately known as the ACERs, back in Houston, really worked hard to get. in to get to the moon. That device hopefully will maintain that. And Apollo only had about a 4.3-day journey to the moon. Our astronauts are going to have about a 10 to 14-day journey.
Right.
So maintaining that physical fitness, that strength and stamina is going to be crucial for the success of being able to do those very physically demanding lunar EVAs. Right. So we're very excited about what the astronauts have said about the device and what they have to say about the role exercise plays, going to the moon. And also the mental benefit.
Sure.
They just really like sweating, breaking the sweat, and actually just feeling like they're just getting a workout.
Right.
So
thank you so much, Rick. I really appreciate it. I know they're going to be in good hands, so we'll let you get back to it. Thank you so much.
Megan, thanks for the time.
Back to you, Rob.
Okay, Megan, back here in Mission Control in Houston, everything is moving along in order. This view of Reed Wiseman on the left, Victor Glover on the right. We have good suit leak checks. Everything aboard Integrity is in excellent shape. The vehicle, with the Earth growing larger and larger in the field of view, we're now just about 8,200 nautical miles away from Earth and closing in for a splashdown just 1 hour and 5 minutes from now.
Integrity, just under a minute till your GPS maneuver initiates, and both GPS units look eager to acquire.
Outstanding. Seats 3 and 4 are working on seat strap in now.
Houston copies.
Once again, as we start to close in on some of the major milestones, the first one coming up in just 31 minutes.
And Integrity, just confirming the LCG gas trap was able to be closed out.
Affirmative.
Copy.
Crew module, service module separation scheduled just 31 minutes from now. The key point of interest, of course, will be the performance of Integrity's heat shield during its high-speed entry back into Earth and the peak heating that is expected around the spacecraft of some 4,000 to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. On Artemis I, as I think most folks know by now, we flew a trajectory known as a skip entry, in which we performed an initial dip into the atmosphere to bleed off some energy. Then we skipped out of the atmosphere and dipped back into the atmosphere before splashing down in the Pacific. But after the mission was over with, we noticed unexpected liberation of some of the charring effects on the heat shield known as AVCOAT. Before the flight, we had an opportunity to sit down and talk with Entry Flight Director Rick Henfling to get a perspective on what this all means and how the mission was redesigned to try to protect Integrity's heat shield to a higher extent. Let's take a look at that interview.
Returning from the moon is a lot different than deorbiting from low Earth orbit. When we return from the moon, we expect to achieve velocities upwards of 36,000 feet per second. And in order to slow down to a nice, graceful splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, the flight crew is going to experience between 3 and 4 times the force of Earth's gravity. On Artemis I, pressure buildup inside the char layer of the heat shield resulted in the char losses we saw. NASA established a Tiger team whose job was to investigate the cause of the problem and then make recommendations on how to fly the Artemis II mission safely and successfully. And so for Artemis II, we are going to fly a profile that ensures the spacecraft will not see that same type of pressure profile. And so the char losses seen on Artemis II will not be like the ones that we saw on Artemis I.
Rick Henfling indicated that...
All right, you're listening live to the feed from NASA as we prepare to welcome the Artemis II's crew back home. And you heard some changes there that they were making to the heat shield to try to better prepare the capsule as it splashes down. There were some problems with the Integrity in Artemis I that they had to make an adjustment so that the capsule was coming in at a different angle and experiencing less of that heat as it approached the splashdown there, which is scheduled still for about an hour from now. So we're going to keep an eye on the time. We're going to keep an eye on that feed coming in from NASA. Let's take actually a look also at the feed from, I think it's, there it is. There we go. From the USS Merthyr. That is the ship deck as the pilots there await the call to go out and get the astronauts after they've splashed down. We're going to take a quick break. Keep it here. We're going to keep you posted and updated on everything that is going on with the Artemis II's gradual and also fast approach to Earth. Keep it right here. Welcome back to Fox 13 Plus. This is Aaron Mesmer. You're watching a live feed from NASA here. This is the countdown to the Artemis II splashdown off the coast of California, off the coast of San Diego. We're going to listen in again to NASA's feed as these astronauts prepare to come back to Earth's atmosphere.
The gentle descent of Integrity towards its splashdown at just a velocity of just 19 miles an hour. And that will begin the recovery operations that you just heard Megan Cruz discuss with her folks on the USS John Murtha. All of Integrity's systems in great shape. The crew is suited up. Leak checks complete as we stand by for the next major milestone, which will be the crew module service module separation just 24.5 minutes from now. All of the activities from the start of entry interface to the point of splashdown will be quite rapid fire, just 13.5 minutes from the point at which we begin descent into the Earth's atmosphere till splashdown. And just to show you, as Rick Shearing, the flight surgeon, alluded to in his interview with Megan Cruz, all of this happens to decelerate the vehicle from traveling around Mach 33 to just 19 miles an hour at splashdown. All of that happening in just 13.5 minutes. But the vehicle and the parachutes are all designed to support all of that, so we'll be standing by to report all that to you in sequential fashion as these milestones are ticked off and as we hear from the crew during its entry back into the Earth's atmosphere and ultimately when they emerge from the blackout period, and at that point we'll be just minutes away from splashdown. So with all of those preparations ongoing, we can return here briefly for another report from the USS John P. Murtha and Megan Cruz. Megan? And we'll regain that communication with the USS John P. Murtha just momentarily.
All right, you're listening in live to a feed from NASA as they are trying to get a live report going there from the USS Murtha, which is where the pilots and medical crews are on standby for the splashdown of the Artemis II. I want to take you through some of the processes that we talked about a little bit earlier at the when we started broadcasting live here. NASA's targeted splashdown time is about 8:07 Eastern time tonight, so we're getting there. We're getting there. It's a little less than an hour away now. All eyes on the Pacific Ocean, where that's going to happen in a little bit. We're going to continue to listen in live here with the crew's communications, with Mission Control, with some live reports here from NASA's feed. Now, we also want to take you out to the USS John P. Murtha, and that's what you're looking at right there. That is the deck of the ship that is going to be heading out to bring these astronauts out of the water. It's just a hive of activity right now. Some MH-60S Seahawk helicopters are stationed there on the deck. The rotors are ready to go. These helicopters are going to serve as the eyes in the sky, providing live images of Orion's descent through the atmosphere before then acting as the primary transport for the astronauts. Once the capsule is secured by Navy divers, these aircrafts are going to hoist Commander Reed Wiseman and his crew from the water. Now, earlier today, NASA astronauts Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and the Commander Reed Wiseman, they were on their way back home. They'd been scheduled for a rest period ahead of reentry before beginning preps. That included reviewing reentry splashdown procedures. They ate a high-protein meal, they took in some extra fluids, and they stowed away some loose items that they don't want to obviously shift around as they get toward Earth's atmosphere. Here's what we can expect now to see in the next less than an hour or so. The capsule is going to separate. They just said a moment ago that that's going to happen in less than a half an hour. Then it's going to begin its fiery dive back through Earth's atmosphere. NASA has said the heat shield is going to have to withstand temperatures of about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit during re-entry. What you're looking at there is one of those helicopters that I mentioned just a moment ago. The crew is also expected to feel up to almost 4 Gs. That's nearly 4 times their normal body weight. As Orion drops lower, there's going to be a planned communications blackout, which you just heard NASA talk about during re-entry before the parachutes deploy, and then the capsule splashes down, into the Pacific Ocean. Let's listen in again live to this NASA feed here.
Don't believe everything that's going on. Just let's trust what we've done to get to this point, and if we do that, we'll be successful today.
Mm-hmm. And also part of the big success is obviously the coordination between NASA and the U.S. military. How does it feel being able to support the human space program we have?
Yeah, I mean, since 1959 with Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, the history between NASA and the Navy has been in lockstep. But like any other skill, if you don't practice it regularly, that skill atrophies. So we've had a few decades off from that. But, over the past 4 or 5 years, really with this ship over the past year, we've constantly trained and working for this moment right here. Building up the hype, but to get to this point today, to be able to trust in all the training we've done. We've worked with, working with NASA, the Air Force, the medical team, dive team. You want to talk about high-performance organizations coming together, working in unison? We are seeing that here on board the USS John P. Murtha, and I can't be more proud of all the work everyone's doing.
Yeah, you had some great words this morning saying just that, again, that it's really nice to see everybody working together and so excited. I mean, you just became the commanding officer of this ship back in February. How does it personally feel for you to be a part of this historic moment today?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'd say any opportunity to command any warship in the United States Navy is a tremendous honor. It is a pinnacle of any naval officer's career. That being said, as my change of command was approaching, and I realized that Artemis was going to be in the window here, to say that I'm humbled and honored to be here is an understatement. What really just excites me is the opportunity to see this crew, who has been training so hard over the past year plus, come together. It is what inspires me. Listening to NASA and the ownership and pride they take. They make my crew better. I think we're making NASA better together. That synergy is something that I'm happy to see and hopefully take forward with me in my career.
Yeah, it's all about partnerships. We couldn't do it without you, and we couldn't have gotten to the moon without our international partners as well. So thank you so much, Captain. It was really great to have you here today.
Thanks, Megan.
Awesome. All right, Rob, back to you.
Thank you, Megan. Back here in Mission Control in Houston. We just had a quick view of the crew. We'll get that view back, and there they are again. Here in Mission Control, the entry team of flight controllers led by Rick Henfling and Jackie Mahaffey serving as the spacecraft communicator. We have just handed over communications links from the Deep Space Network that we communicated with the crew through from the time of the translunar injection burn back on April 2nd. We've just handed back to the Tracking and Data Relay satellite system as we prepare for the crew module service module separation that will take place just 17 minutes from now. With the Earth looming in front of Integrity as it barrels back for a splashdown of the Pacific just 50 minutes from now, we're just 5,700 nautical miles from splashdown. Just one other quick note about the comparison from the Artemis I entry profile to the Artemis II entry profile and how that is serving as an extra layer of protection for Integrity's heat shield. The Artemis I entry had an entry range of some 3,178 nautical miles, a very long downtrack, and a very longer period of exposure to heat loads than we're experiencing tonight. It also had that skip entry profile that we discussed earlier, dipping into the Earth's atmosphere, then back out, then back in. It was about 20 minutes of exposure.
Integrity, Houston, comm check on TDRS.
Jackie, we have it loud and clear on TDRS.
We have you the same.
And there's one of the weather balloons being deployed from the USS John P. Murtha. So the Artemis I entry had the vehicle.
The update on GPS, we haven't seen it track in yet.
Reed, we are watching. We are starting to get into the window where they may start acquiring, so should be within the next 10 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. We're holding at step 17 and getting ready for CMRCS.
Okay, you're listening live to the feed we're getting in from NASA as they try to walk these astronauts through a splashdown off the coast of San Diego. I think what you heard just a moment ago is that there's going to be the separation, the capsule separation at about in about 17, probably now 15 minutes or so. That's going to happen. The Artemis crew is then going to be coming in at 75 miles above the Pacific Ocean at 24,000 miles per hour. That's fast enough to fly from Los Angeles to New York in about 6 minutes. And then the temperatures are going to climb to some 5,000 degrees as they approach that splashdown period. We're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to come back in just a little bit. We're going to have some more live coverage from NASA and from here at the Fox 13 Plus set. Keep it right here. This is where you want to have all of your live coverage of the Artemis II splashdown. Stay with us here. Okay.
from a quick burst of the reaction control system. Thrusters, that will be a hot fire test prior to the separation of the crew module from the service module. The European service module has performed flawlessly throughout this flight. Everything, all the burns that had been prescribed for that service module have been executed on time and without a problem. There is the European flight control room that has overseen the manufacturing, the design of the European service module. They deserve quite a bit of credit on this mission for not only propelling the Integrity and its astronauts toward the moon, but also conducting the fine-tuning of its trajectory to bring it to this point where we are dead spot on down the middle of the corridor trajectory-wise to bring Integrity down for its splashdown in the Pacific just 44 minutes from now. What you're looking at is a computer-generated visualization based on real-time telemetry from Integrity, currently traveling about 16,000 miles an hour.
All right, you're still listening in there to NASA's feed of the Artemis II as it's approaching re-entry. We are now, I think, probably about 10 minutes away from the separation. You just saw an image there from the deck of the USS Mertha, the choppers that have been going up there and keeping an eye on the capsule as it approaches re-entry, as it approaches Earth's atmosphere. So let's just listen in once more. They've got a lot of action going on there on NASA's feed. Let's listen back in.
9.5 minutes away from the crew module, service module separation. We are confirming.
Integrity, we are assessing details, but so far looks like a good hot fire.
Looks good on board, Jackie. Thank you.
And Jackie Mahaffey took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say that we had a good hot fire test of the thrusters in advance of the crew module, service module separation that's coming up just 8.5 minutes from now. This will begin the period in which we will have rapid-fire succession of critical activities on board that will lead to entry interface just 28 minutes from now, where the vehicle will enter the Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of 400,000 feet. The time of entry interface, 6:53 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time.
All right, you're listening in there live to NASA's feed of the countdown to Artemis II Splashdown. Earlier today, Fox's Marie Ettinger talked about why the re-entry is one of the most dangerous phases of the entire mission. Let's listen into what she had to say about that.
Integrity's astronauts were awakened
with Artemis
at mid-morning.
NASA learned the strain on the heat shield was a bit too high coming back down to Earth, so this time around, the 4-person crewed mission is on a steeper, much more direct descent to minimize that strain, and that has required some finagling. The crew's re-entry corridor is only a few miles wide, and they have to get it perfectly in the middle. So last night around 11, NASA turned on Orion's thrusters for about 9 seconds. That'll push our astronauts back toward Earth, and gravity will take care of the rest. But again, they still have to make it in that exact pathway. So NASA is doing another trajectory correction burn this afternoon around 1:53 to make sure that path is just right.
Everybody's going to be on pins and needles, but NASA's very confident that it will work out.
During the splashdown, the Orion capsule is going to separate from the main ship. They'll enter a 6-minute communication blackout at 400,000 feet, so just a little bit nerve-wracking there. The crew is also going to be going through 3.9 Gs. That's like having 4 times their own body weight crushing down on top of them. NASA is aiming for a splashdown at 8:07 Eastern, but that'll be off the San Diego coast, so it'll actually be 5:07 Pacific for the astronauts. Marie Ettinger, Fox 13 News.
All right, Marie, thanks so much. So a lot to be excited about, a lot to look forward to in the next little bit. We've got about, let's say about 40 minutes or so.
I would say I won't miss.
Going to space is something very...
of our show. We're going to be wrapping this up in just a little bit. Sorry about that. So we've got about 30 minutes or so before the splashdown that's scheduled for about 8:07 p.m. I want to thank you for joining us here on Fox 13 News Plus. We're going to be the place to be to watch the Artemis II return to Earth. We're going to be sending it back over to Mark and Allie in just a moment. They're going to be taking over coverage from about 7:30 until 8:10. That's when we're going to take it back over here on the Plus and bring you the coverage of, hopefully by then, the astronauts have splashed down and are in the process of getting back to Earth and rescued and hopefully eventually aboard the USS Merthyr. So keep it here. We are the place to be to watch all of the coverage of Artemis II's return to Earth.
And welcome to each and every one of you as history will unfold right in front of all of our eyes again tonight. Good evening and welcome back. I'm Mark Wilson.
And I'm Allie Corey. We're so glad to have you with us. This is our extended, very special version of Fox 13 as all eyes are on the West Coast tonight, where Orion is expected to splash down off the coast of San Diego. We're taking live pictures right now. This is from the USS John P. Murtha flight deck. This is where the Navy is preparing to retrieve our brave astronauts after quite the 10-day journey they've had. They blasted off 10 days ago near Cape Canaveral and had quite the visuals of space, seeing Earth from this vantage point and then going further than anyone has ever gone before, making their way to the other side of the moon. And they got a special treat, seeing an amazing eclipse from space as well. And then was the return home.
I know we have the best medical team if anything happens. Our crew is ready to be taken well care of, and I appreciate so much work we've done to get us to this point.
We've worked this out. We've worked everything down. We've done daytime. We've done nighttime. We've tried it all. If you know what's successful, rely on your instincts, rely on your training.
That splashdown, again, expected about 14 minutes after re-entry begins. It's going to be so incredible.
I want to show you some live video and some live pictures from NASA's coverage of the splashdown. You actually see this right here. This is happening live as we see it. What's happening is the crew module has just separated from the service module. You're going to see some of these. Let's listen for a quick second because this is a big moment here.
Integrity, a job well done.
Integrity, no action for the 4 CDH cautions. Those are SM related, not applicable.
Integrity.
That's the service module that they just separated the capsule from, the Integrity capsule, of course, which is what they're in. They're going to do a slight rotation, and here that happened right at 7:33, just as we were in that other soundbite here. But in about 20 minutes is when it's going to hit its atmosphere, traveling at a max speed of, they keep updating these speeds, but it's a little over 24,000 miles an hour now, 24,661. It's not there yet. That'll be the max speed. Then we'll get that 6-minute communications blackout as it finds itself in the middle of a fireball.
And they will see,
re-entry.
sure, they will see that fire out their window too. And imagine after spending 10 days in space, right, their bodies are going to start taking on gravity at the same time that they're experiencing those G-forces up to 4 times of their body weight just pressing against them. So just remarkable what these astronauts have been able to do and what they are about to do. I think we can listen in for what NASA is saying for a bit as they continue this journey home.
Raised burn orientation. Just 2,800 miles from Earth.
Houston, we got a great view of the European service module out the window with the sun hitting the side and the solar rays and the NASA worm right there. It's a beautiful looking machine.
Roger.
And we have completed the maneuver to the raised burn orientation. 1 minute away from the raised burn.
As Commander Reed Wiseman, we're reacting to that. And what I've loved about watching a lot of this is we've heard this from literally since the moment they took off, is that as amazing as these astronauts are, the simplest little things to them, they're still in awe of everything.
Yes.
So you see how deeply they appreciate just the beauty of separating with their European module here so that the capsule can now begin its way back home. And you know they're excited to be home and to start sharing their stories about everything they've seen and done.
Absolutely. And can we take a moment to congratulate and just commend the folks at Mission Control there? I mean, you just hear, and obviously they have to be calm. It's part of their job. But they are just so poised and prepared for this moment. And it is so fascinating. It draws you in listening to them speak because they're talking, Mark, like they would just be having a casual conversation and not making history in just moments.
These are our superheroes of science, you know. They're the ones who make the most complicated tasks on the planet look easy. Of course, we're talking about all of their support staff all across NASA as well. And to think about what they're doing, remember, they're doing this little flip here of the capsule to put it in position so it can make this reentry. But essentially, much like we saw with the space shuttles for what, 20-some, almost 30 years, this is gliding. Granted, it's falling backwards
Very
at about
fast.
25,000 miles an hour, but it's hitting a spot, and it's going to do one of these little arcs, as they call it. And I thought it was fascinating today, which was really interesting. Remember the Artemis I mission? That was the uncrewed mission. They had some interesting issues. We were covering it here on Fox 13. Remember, they were delayed for a while. They experienced those issues with the heat shields, and they realized that a lot of that was the time that was under the stress. So what they did with this mission was they actually changed their arc of reentry here. So they're only going to be about 13.5 minutes of what they call these peak loads, which is the worst of the heat, and the pressure on the vehicle, which is about 4,000 to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just amazing.
And can you 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit? And Becca, interrupt us, please, if something amazing is happening and you want us to stop talking. But Mark and I have just been so fascinated by all of this from 10 days ago when we watched launch to now. And it's just so amazing to think about what we have been able to do. As humans, it's so fascinating. There's actually going to be 11 parachutes. That's something I didn't know. What we will see are the 3 main ones that will happen once they're actually in view for us. But there are 11, and then those 3 that will deploy, bringing them from, how do you wrap your head around this? 24,000 miles per hour, okay? And then that series of parachutes will bring them down to 20 miles per hour when they splash down.
The heat was fascinating me too, and I thought it was incredible, because I'm thinking, you've got this structure, and of course they know how to put this together, but the way the entire capsule was created, you know, if you weld something together, which you'd have to have welds on there, right? 5,000 degrees is going to melt that.
Right.
So how in the world do they do this? Well, they actually have, NASA figured this out decades ago or so ago. It's called friction stir welding. This is a process that they figure out that bonds the metal of this capsule together without even welding it, so it actually becomes stronger than the surrounding metal. So all of it becomes one large giant piece of steel that's forged that can never be burned.
Wow.
It's just amazing.
It's something that Mark and I were talking about is what happens to them when they are going that fast, right? Because you think about those G-forces on your body, and after having recently done the Navy Blue Angels, and you've experienced G-forces before.
They're getting about 4 Gs. Here you go. This is a great way to see it. They're getting about 4 Gs on their body, and 1 G would be 1 times your body weight. So we always have 1 G on us at all times. When they take off, they're getting a little more than 4, so when they come back, they're a little bit less than that. But remember, they don't have any gravity yet. They don't have gravity until they're about 3/4 of the way through this reentry period. So it's intense as you see their vertigo. The shaking is just incredible. It's very difficult to breathe even when they have their suits on. The blood shoots all the way to their legs, to literally the tip of their toes and their fingernails.
It just pulls all the way down.
They've got the Huck maneuver, as you remember, the hook maneuver. They've got to squeeze and breathe as quickly and shallowly as possible to continue to get that airflow around their body into their brain so they don't pass out. But again, these are some of the best trained astronauts on the planet. That's why they're on this mission. So this should not be a huge. This is something that would wreck a lot of us. In fact,
it would
most
absolutely
of us.
destroy us.
But for them, this is nothing.
And they're wearing the G-force suits as well, which actually compression to try and keep that blood from just completely pooling down to their feet.
Yeah, it squeezes you, and it keeps at least some of it from completely leaving your brain, because the second it leaves your brain is when you black out first, and then you would pass out, which again they're not doing. But it is fascinating, and then all of those senses, when they do come back and then they do feel gravity come on, that's going to be kind of a shock to the senses.
Absolutely.
They haven't had gravity, they haven't had a single ounce of weight on them in what? A little over 10 days, almost exactly 10 days.
Their body goes through these immense changes, and so once they come down, you might think, you'll be watching with us, why are they not getting them out? Why aren't they rushing over there and pulling them out? Well, first of all, the capsule is still really hot. because we talked about how it reaches 5,000 degrees, and then they also have to worry about, you know, toxic chemicals because of everything that it's taken on in the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons it's going to take a little bit, even if they do splash down right at 8:07, 8:08, it's going to take a little bit. Astronauts have to shut down, the commander's got to shut down the entire capsule, and some of the engines, a lot of the mechanisms that are on the actual capsule can still be emitting some gases, so you don't want that to get anywhere near the Navy divers. So for them to begin, we're talking, I think the window we're seeing is about 35 to 40 minutes after we finally do get a splashdown. Will the Navy divers be able to come up, and they'll actually bring it's kind of a makeshift. I know they call it the front porch, but I'm curious to see it. It's going to be like a platform.
Inflatable platform.
It looks like some sort of inflatable platform. They've got to make sure there are going to be inflatables underneath the capsule too to make sure it's righted. And then once they do that, then they can slowly start extracting them. They'll come out on a helicopter first, and I think we're told there's 2 helicopters, so they'll likely do 2 by 2.
Right.
They probably have the order at least set, and they'll be lifted to the Mertha, which is the USS Mertha. That's the carrier that's standing by, and then they'll be flown back home.
Back to Houston. They got to go to Houston because there's all these medical checks that they have to do. They have to relearn to walk because you think they're not using muscle for 10 days up in space.
Let's talk about their triage protocols here too. Their inner ears, just because a lot of the G-forces here are all kind of off as well. But this gives you a little bit better idea of what you're seeing here. And when there you see the helicopter lift. So unsure if, again, it's only been 10 days. Hopefully they'll be upright and they'll be able to have some sort of strength to stand. They might be in a basket. Don't be alarmed if they are lying completely horizontal, because they may just do the lift basket that way.
Right. They want to just keep it nice and easy on them.
Sure. And they'll do some testing once they get on board the Mertha as well, and that's when they're going to do all of their vitals checks, make sure they can stand. And as soon as they clear all of those in their inner ear, you see lower right-hand corner there as well. That's another thing. And between the reentry and just not having gravity, their whole equilibriums are going to be off once you throw all this gravity right back on them in such a short period of time.
I mean, I just think of, you know, for the average person who doesn't go to space, I think about when you have to pop your ears, you know, and that's just from elevation changes. They're going to be experiencing an unbelievable amount of, I don't want to say pain, but I mean, think about it. They're going to have nausea. They're going to be, their equilibrium is going to be off. That is why, you know, they give them the time as well in that capsule to kind of come to.
It's a shock to the system.
And be ready, There's
no doubt. Now, what we were seeing earlier after that separation was what NASA calls a visualization. They have, of course, all the data, the speeds, the angles, the trajectory, everything to create these high-speed simulations. This actually, though, appears to be an actual live image. Ooh. Are we seeing that? Are we starting to get that? Yeah, this is a live image of it, and it looks like this is probably, I'm guessing that camera's going to be, it's going to be pointed up because inside of that heat shield, because that heat shield is going to start deflecting a lot of that heat.
Oh, wow.
Now, yeah, they are starting to rotate there, and if I'm looking correctly, it looks like they have actually started that re-entry there. So 9 minutes is when you're going to start to see the peak, and we're looking at 13 minutes of them hitting 25, it's up to 25,000 miles an hour now, 5,000 degrees.
I can only imagine, Mark, what they're feeling right now. You know, they prepared for this moment, but I mean, they have got to have butterflies and adrenaline like never before. This has just got to be unreal.
Well, and probably excitement. I mean, if anyone knows what this means to humanity, what this means for our future going forward, I mean, just think, we're talking about in a year and a half.
Sure. We're
talking about having humans on Mars again, on the moon again. And I think what was really special, too, is because this is far beyond going to the moon. I mean, NASA's actually using the phrase, this is a step toward making the moon home.
Yes.
You're talking about people who are going to be working there, who are going to be living on there, whether it's a number of things that we're going to be farming there. And the most fascinating part of this, I think, too, was remember the risk of this mission, and that's what's really most important, is that when they flew around the moon, which happened on, Becca, did we say it was Monday night? It was roughly Monday night or Sunday morning is when that happened. They had a number of tests. They had some geological tests they had to do. They had some eye tests that they had to do with some of the imagery, comparing that as well. But there were 2 really big things that struck out to me. So for 40 minutes, they had to go complete blackout because they were on the other side of the moon. So there's not a satellite in the world.
No communication at all.
So they had virtually no power as well. So that's that's when they really had time to reflect. That's where you started to see these really incredible images looking back at Mother Earth. And at the same time, they also had to test what's called this op-nav system. They actually used a handheld camera and some star trackers, because they always have to plan for everything. Well, what if there's 6 or 7 redundancies in power once they did get around the moon? And once that happens next year, what if something goes wrong? How are they going to be able to get themselves back? Well, they literally have to. If you think about it, how many of us would be able to get to a new destination without our phones? They actually had to test a system to find their way back, powering the craft by following the stars. Wow. Which is just incredible to me.
I mean, these astronauts are absolutely brilliant. And how many minutes are we now away from them on re-entry? Are we just about 5 or 6?
Yeah.
5 or 6 minutes. I'm getting so excited. Now the astronauts can manually take over if they need to, but that is only if it's an absolute necessity.
Right.
Is NASA saying anything that we want to listen into? Okay.
Let's jump to, is that the package here? So this is the, there you go. This is no ordinary feat here. So during re-entry, they're going to get this max velocity at 24,000 miles an hour, a little over 24,000 miles just before re-entry. Listen to this for a second.
We're going to come into the atmosphere at about almost 40 times the speed of sound, and then we will slow down to a 20-mile-an-hour touchdown.
Fast they're going to come in for re-entry. Think of it like this. At that speed, you could literally fly from New York to LA in 6 minutes, less than. You could cross the entire United States in less time than it takes to brew a pot of coffee. It's pretty remarkable. So we've heard a little bit about Commander Reed's story. He, of course, is the shuttle commander. His wife died a few years ago. We've heard that story. There was something pretty special, and we want to play this for you real quick. This is a story that we aired a little bit earlier this week. Show you exactly what they did and why it was so important. But NASA decided, hey, we need to name some lunar crafts. These are the lunar landers, and they're also let the crew of this Artemis II mission name their own shuttle, name their own capsule, which is where Integrity came from. That came from the crew. That didn't come from NASA.
Yeah, they came up with that.
It was pretty neat. But how they named one of the lunar cradle landers as well. Watch this for a second.
Integrity, good roll pitch.
NASA's Artemis II crew left Earth last week with one goal in mind. And as of Monday night, the mission around the moon is now accomplished.
It is so great to hear from Earth again.
The crew has officially gone further into deep space than any other human being has gone before.
We will construct science outposts. We will drive rovers. We will do radio astronomy. We will found companies. We will bolster industry. We will inspire. But ultimately, we will always choose Earth.
The Orion spacecraft traveled 152,000 miles away from Earth to get never-before-seen images of the moon and test the capsule's ability to operate in deep space and in extreme levels of space radiation. The crew celebrating the milestone with tears of joy and a dedication for NASA Commander Reed Wiseman's late wife, Carol, who passed away from cancer in 2020.
Our science team helped us out with a couple of relatively fresh craters on the moon that have not been previously named, and our crew would like to propose a couple of potential names. And so we lost a loved one. Her name was Carol, the spouse of Reed, the mother of Katie and Ellie, and it's a bright spot on the moon. And we would like to call it Carol.
The crew left the moon's orbit late Monday night and is now on their way back into Earth's atmosphere to return home as heroes. NASA expects the crew to splash down on Friday in the Pacific Ocean. At New York, Caroline Elliott, Fox News.
Oh, I love the emotion that you hear there. Is this a live look right now?
That's what they're seeing. They're about, what'd you say, about 3 minutes, it sounds like, from them hitting their re-entry phase.
We're getting so close, and these images that we're able to see of Earth are so beautiful, but imagine these astronauts being able to experience it the way that they have over the last 10 days. We heard so much wisdom coming from the astronauts, especially during that blackout period where it was just them alone going behind the moon, and just how it made them feel kind of small in a way, you know, experiencing something like that that's just so extravagant. But if you can, get a moment to listen to some of the things that these astronauts have said on their mission, because it is so moving and inspirational and really powerful. And they said, you know, we want to challenge our young people to not let this be history for long. Let's keep doing it.
They put the pressure on
to say,
look, we're just taking this one step. This is on you, next generation, to make sure that this sort of exploration for the goodness of mankind will continue. And I think it was just it was one of those things where it was a little bit of a call to the future, but at the same time a call to the present to say, you know what? There's a lot going on in our world. There's a lot of things that people worry about, but at the end of the day, and I think it was a Commander Reed who said, what's most important is not necessarily appreciating Earth, but that we love thy neighbor and we'll love one another. And I think that separation, in all likelihood, from their own families, from their own loved ones here at home, if anything you get, and we've heard that from a lot of astronauts, if anything, I think the appreciation for Mother Earth is a given that they all have and get, but when you start talking about being 250,000 miles away from your loved ones, that'll put a new perspective on your life.
With zero distraction, and I mean, sure. We're just 1 minute away now from that initial re-entry. We're going to listen in now to NASA.
Integrity.
This is going to happen because there's going to be times where there's some communication drops, and in all honesty, Commander Reed's probably got his hands full right now.
Sure.
But they're coordinating things here, and all right, we should have this in about 10 seconds. Let's try to listen again as they'll call this as soon as this thing really kind of starts moving.
And we have crossed the threshold, now entering the Earth's atmosphere. We're at 400,000 feet, traveling 34,800 feet per second. Time to splash down, 13 minutes, 10 seconds. And as predicted, we've entered our communications blackout. This will be a 6-minute blackout period. No voice, no data from the crew.
Wow.
And that's expected. So perhaps imagine being on that crew now, knowing that you're hurtling towards Earth, scorching at 25-some thousand miles an hour in a fireball, knowing there's an end here, about 30 seconds from the peak heating, which we're hearing is going to be around 5,000 degrees.
5,000 degrees, yeah. And we should mention, you know, their family is not on the ship there waiting. They're not on USS John P. Murtha.
That's the hard part. You'd want them to be right there as soon as you get off. But,
sure, and imagine, you know, the anxiousness of us and the excitement. You know, my heart's beating so fast right now for them. During this blackout period, they're all in Houston watching this with mission control, their loved ones, you know, coming home. But this is surely going to be the 6 longest minutes, I'm sure, of their lives.
If you can see this, there's a tiny little pinhole right there, we think, in the middle. Yeah, we took, okay, NASA's going to move some of these images around before if you see that back again, integrity is visible to some of NASA's cameras, so we should have that here in a second. But you're right, it's going to be difficult. For those of you who missed the beginning of us when we came on, we're here at 8:30. Here's roughly what's going to happen. Once we get splashed down, they're going to have these inflatables on the bottom of the capsule on integrity, make sure it's fully uprighted. Then they've got to make sure the entire system is shut down so it's not emitting any more gases. That's about a 25-30 minute period, somewhere in there. Meantime, the Navy divers are going to be dropped by 2 helicopters, and those Navy divers then will build a short platform to retrieve the astronauts. They'll hoist them back up, take them to the Murtha. They'll be checked out there, probably spend a little bit of time on the Murtha.
They might spend the night there.
Right, and then they will actually be flown to a base in San Diego, and then again, assuming all is cleared, then they'll have a midnight flight to Johnson Space Center in Houston, where their families then will be waiting there. So they're probably not going to have a reunion with moms and dads and
for a few days,
and the girls for some of that may come tonight, assuming all things, if everything goes perfectly. Here's a better view now.
Oh wow, it's an absolute fireball. Look at that.
So remember, that capsule is upside down. That heat shield is on the back end of it. And what that heat shield is doing is throwing all of that fire away from the capsule to protect them. Again, this is a visualization because we're not quite there yet, but NASA's spot on with these things because they know the temperatures, they know the angle, they know the pitch, they have every single measure to make a perfect visualization of what it actually is looking like right now.
Yeah, and this is all mapped out for us, so we know exactly what to expect. But we were just talking about that reentry, and something that I thought was so fascinating is that they did something called a skip maneuver.
Right.
So if you've ever skipped a stone on the water, that's basically what they did, because they dip into the atmosphere and then they pop back out, and that basically helps to reduce the G-forces on the crew.
Sure.
Because as we were saying before, they're going to have 4 times the weight on them as they're taking on gravity coming back to Earth. So just unbelievable pressure. 9 minutes now to splashdown. So this is still a visualization, and of course, as soon as we are able to see something, we will show you. Can we see what Mission Control is doing right now? Because they're in that blackout. How much time do we have? Can we show some of the images? We have 90 seconds until they. We're talking to our producer, Becca. We're all experiencing this right alongside you live. It's so exciting, and I just feel so many butterflies.
It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. And we do want to mention here, as we come on here at 8 o'clock, that we're going to have Fox 13 Plus as well after we're done. We're going to go till about, to make sure it's all splashed down good. Okay, we're hearing the helicopters do have visuals of it, which is great news.
Awesome.
We should have images of that soon, probably from San Diego, and in all likelihood, Johnson Space Center will have cameras available here via NASA here shortly on that. So that's good news. So lots of good news and a lot of steps, and within about another 2 or 3 minutes, we should have communication restored as this blackout ends. And there you're looking, that would be a camera on the deck of the USS John Murtha, which will be the ship where they will be hoisted to in just a short period of time.
And they have got a team of doctors and staff who will just be checking them out, basically seeing what the impact was on their body from spending 10 days in space in zero gravity. And it's going to be a very slow transition for our astronauts because, as we said, they're going to have to retrain their muscles and sort of relearn how to walk because they had no gravity for the past 10 days. And so once they're brought onto that ship, they will be checked out. They'll likely spend the night there on the ship before they're brought to Houston, where they'll likely spend the next couple of weeks. Just kind of getting reacclimated to life on Earth.
Yeah. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen. Their lives have really changed here in the last 10 days, and these are names that are going to be forever associated with this historic mission, further than any man has ever traveled. And it only makes us that much more interested and excited for Artemis 3 and Artemis 4. Artemis 3 is one more mission before Artemis 4, which would be in 2028 when we should land on the moon.
And a lot of firsts, too. First woman, Christina Cook, to make this journey, and our first black man to make the journey as well, Victor Glover, Canadian. It's so exciting. And look, we're seeing it.
That should be a live image right there from San Diego.
Wow. That is unreal.
So the process begins in a short time. We'll probably start to see it as that fireball diminishes. You mentioned those all those parachutes as they start to deploy, because imagine the science and the parachutes and the physics it's going to take to slow the spacecraft down from 25,000 miles an hour to 19, 20 miles an hour.
Right. So there are a total of 11 parachutes that will be deployed. So you imagine that. Okay, we're hearing that the trajectory is perfect. I love that. That is what you want to hear for sure. When did we go into the blackout? Did you guys see what time it was? Because we should be coming out of it.
6 minutes here. We're still on track for about an 8:08. Let's listen in for a second as they.
Yeah, you loud and clear.
Your trajectory is nominal, and your recovery teams have visual.
Guidance looks good.
No action for the enabled internal camera controller fail.
Big cheers from the viewing room here in Mission Control as voice communication reestablished with Commander Reed Wiseman. For America and a waiting world, Integrity is 5.5 minutes away from coming home. Passing 100,000 feet now. Range to splashdown 19 nautical miles.
Integrity, impact to the camera controller fail is no Cab 1 views of the chutes.
Integrity.
We're processing good data through the GPS system. A good view of Integrity, time to splashdown 4.5 minutes. And a view of Integrity from the WB-57. We're at 50,000 feet. The pyros are armed for forward bay cover jettison. And there go the first series of parachutes, and we're on drogues.
And Houston, we're visual 2 drogues out the window.
2 good drogue chutes. Next up.
We copy, we see them.
Next up, the deployment of pilot parachutes that will pull the main chutes out. Time to splash down 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Perfect descent rate according to flight dynamics.
Good rates on 2 drogues.
We see the same on board.
Passing through 10,000 feet, still on drogues. Main chute deploy. We're at 5,000 feet. Search and recovery beacon has been activated on Integrity. And we have 3 good main chutes. Good 3 main chutes, good reefing, good descent rate.
Good rates, and we see 3 good-looking parachutes. Integrity, cabin pressure indicates no need for hydrazine checks.
Integrity copies.
This is a perfect descent for Integrity. Its crew sounding hale and hearty on board. Time to splash down 1 minute, 15 seconds. Integrity about to complete a journey spanning 694,481 miles from its launch from the Kennedy Space Center back on April 1st, and a trip around the moon. Passing through 1,000 feet.
Integrity splashdown, sending post-landing command now.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy splashdown, waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete. Integrity's astronauts back on Earth.
Nothing like a little history here on this Friday night. You know, hats off to NASA and this crew for pulling off something so remarkable that who would have thought it'd take us 54 years to fly around the moon again. But here we are, we've done it. In another year and a half, if all goes continue as planned, we're going to have humans walking around on the moon.
Walking on the moon. And I loved hearing Mission Control use the word perfect on their descent and then saying that the crew sounds hale and hearty. So honestly, it doesn't get any better than that. And they're home. They're back home.
It doesn't. From every single, from the launch, which always has its complications, which can, from the reentry, which is the most difficult, of course, the most threatening, the most challenging, the highest risk. There's so much that could have just gone wrong in the last 30 minutes for them to use the word perfect and even nominal. We'll take nominal because nominal means everything's going exactly as planned.
And it was so cool when you were watching. You may have seen these little spouts of white on your screen, and those were the parachutes being deployed. And then when we took the black and white image, you could see the gases coming off of the capsule, and that's just one of the reasons why they're going to be in there for about 30 to 60 minutes before you can see the Navy's headed towards them, but they won't actually get them out of the capsule or get too close to the capsule until they're able to let those gases sort of evaporate and let it cool off, because remember, it reached 5,000 degrees. So that is a smoking hot capsule.
It's going to take a little bit here. You know, well, they want to make sure, and it sounds like we'll hear it if there is an issue, which there has not been so far. They've got to do these inflatables to make sure it's upright, and it certainly looks like it is. It's hard to say because they're probably a good, maybe about a nautical mile away from the John Murtha right now. But the divers, those are Navy boats there that are coming upon it right now, and there you go. That's a little bit better view here. Let's watch this and see how they do this. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. The good news is, as we direct you to the football game, nothing's going to happen here with this capsule here in the better part of the next 20 to 30 minutes. So they're not going to be extracted until at the earliest at that point. We're going to be covering that all for you. We're going to have that for you later tonight. We're going to come back on shortly after 11 o'clock, or shortly after 9 o'clock in the halftime of the show, right?
Yes.
Halftime of the football game, so we'll have something that for you. So, but we do appreciate you watching history with us right here.
Oh, it was so much fun. If you want to keep streaming, you can watch the Artemis coverage over on the Fox 13 Plus with our own Aaron Mesmer. UFF football starts right now.
All right, you're watching live coverage of NASA's feed as Artemis II has just splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego. I am Aaron Mesmer. I'm going to be your host now, coming in for the next, I don't know, hour or so, maybe hour and a half, as we continue our live coverage of Artemis II returning to Earth after just making a perfect bullseye splashdown for Integrity and its 4 astronauts. What's happening right now is rescue crews are going out there to try to get these astronauts back out of the capsule and safely aboard the USS Mertha. I want to bring in Fox 13 political editor Craig Patrick. Craig, you and I have talked over the last several weeks, certainly a couple of days, about what's been going on with the Artemis II. First of all, Craig, thank you so much for joining us. What was your take on what we just saw happen out there? That was amazing.
Extraordinary, beautiful to see. It was not without risk. Every reentry carries risk. This one, perhaps some heightened risk. And if there was some controversy with respect to Artemis II, this was it. There had been some second guessing because of the damage the heat shield had taken on Artemis I. Not just the charring and the disintegration that you're going to expect from the Avcode system affixed to the titanium, but also the fact that after Artemis I, they found chunks of the heat shield just removed, gone, and it wasn't entirely clear how that happened. Well, they said gas pressure, that's what did it, but what the physics weren't entirely worked out when they moved forward with Artemis II, because they had run simulation after simulation, had done all the analytics and said that it certainly is safe with some room to spare. But given the question marks that still remained about the physics of what caused this, that's why there were some second-guessing NASA's decision. So we now see that we've crossed that bridge and done so successfully. Yes, they're going to examine the heat shield, certainly for weeks and a period of months thereafter, and perhaps modify it if needed thereafter. But this was an absolutely perfect picture, perfect landing through what we have the launch as well, but certainly the landing, one of the riskiest parts of the flight, cleared with absolute flying colors to a T. Of course, it's reminiscent of where we were in the late 60s and early 1970s, because we've done something that we haven't done in more than 50 years. In fact, we set an all-time record of distance flown by these 4 astronauts.
Yeah, and you and I have talked previously. This is the first crewed lunar mission in decades, the first time humans have traveled around the moon since the Apollo era. How does the Artemis II compare to those missions? What is different this time?
Well, the closest comparison would be Apollo 8. Both are very similar. Apollo 8 was the lead up to Apollo 11 in that you first had to circle the moon to make sure that there, as a glide path, ready to actually move forward with a lander, that everything else worked. In that sense, this is where Artemis II would compare to Apollo 8. Both of them setting the stage for what's to come. What's to come in 1969? Well, that would be the Apollo 11 moon landing and others, ultimately the 12 men who walked on the moon to follow. This time around, it's going to be, in the course of time, setting the stage for much more, but beginning with what's planned as Artemis IV, which would be returning astronauts back to the surface of the moon. So Apollo 8 would be the closest comparison, but there's also a big difference between the two. With Apollo 8, it was moving in low lunar orbit, within 60 miles of the lunar surface. Artemis II didn't do that. It traveled much farther from the moon. Yes, it circled it, but it circled it from a distance of what, 4,100 miles, 5,000 miles at one point. And in doing that, it traveled more than 4,000 miles farther than did Apollo 13. So that's why you also have comparisons to Apollo 13. Apollo 13 did not intend to do that. That was a rescue mission after things went terribly wrong, and a remarkably successful one in the end. So if you're drawing comparisons, you can say Apollo 13 for distance flown, and then we just set the new record from Apollo 13. But the real comparison would be that Christmas Eve of 1968, when Commander Borman set the stage for what became Man on the Moon. And this is setting the stage for so much more, because we're sending astronauts to the moon, but this time with plans to stay.
Absolutely, Craig. And I want to just punch the NASA audio back up here. I want to listen in a little bit longer and just kind of hear what's going on, because we're seeing the beginnings of this rescue effort to get these astronauts out of the capsule and back eventually to land. So let's listen to what's happening there.
All of the milestones were executed in perfect fashion. Integrity entering the Earth's atmosphere right on time, reaching its peak speed shortly after a blackout period began. We emerged from the blackout period, but the recovery imagery airborne assets were able to pick up Integrity's descent almost immediately through entry interface, tracking the vehicle all the way down. And finally, you saw the sequence of chute deployments. First, the forward bay cover being pulled off the top of the vehicle by a series of 3 parachutes. Then the drogue chutes were deployed, followed by the 3 main chutes that slowed the splashdown velocity of Integrity to just 19 miles an hour.
Yeah, Craig, you know, let's talk a little bit about what they just said. Those series of parachute deployments there, that is something that I think has become synonymous and iconic when you think about these lunar missions and the Apollo missions and now the Artemis missions. We're so used to seeing those parachutes, and when we start seeing it, it's usually when the orange and white parachutes deploy.
Yeah.
What did you think when we saw this happen just a few minutes ago?
Nostalgia. On one hand, knowing that we're returning to the pursuits of the moon that we had in the 1960s and early 70s, but this time in a much more profound way. And frankly, relief too, because you have that moment where you lose communication contact. There were some questions about the heat shield. NASA and the administrator assured, again, as I noted earlier, that it would be safe, but you do take a risk. So it was a combination for me of relief and nostalgia, but beyond that, recognizing that this now is officially a true glide path for some truly significant things to come. If NASA adheres to its current timeline, that'll be in 2027 with Artemis 3, and then the big one with Artemis 4 in 2028. That's if that timeline holds.
So what are we seeing right now? I don't know if you have the feed up, where you are, Craig. But what our viewers are watching is the live feed from, I think, both the ship deck and probably from the aerials coming in from the helicopters that are as the rescue efforts are going on. So just take us through a little bit about what we should expect to see, as this plays out.
Well, the time frame from this point forward to get the astronauts out of the capsule and then onto the ships for their return home, it's going to take roughly 2 hours total, based on the plan at least. After the splashdown, you have these airbags. I believe there are 5 of them, and it's at the top of the Orion. They blow up, and that's used to make sure that the capsule is upward, and they have it stabilized in that sense. And it also keeps it stable. If you have waves or something like that could hinder the recovery operation. And then you have members of the U.S. Navy, of course, NASA experts, recovery team experts there as well. They're already there. They knew exactly where they're going to land. That's a matter of physics. And then once they arrive, and they're doing it now, they're arriving in an inflatable craft. They're going to, before they instantly open the hatch, they're going to check and make sure that everything checks out, that all is good to go. There's a collar that'll go around the craft. It also blows up. And again, that keeps it in place from bobbing around, moving around as much. That helps with the recovery as well. And then at that point, once they run their exterior checks, then they'll ask the astronauts to step out one by one after they open the hatch. And then that's what we're seeing now. But you're asking, what are we going to see going forward, say over the next 90 minutes or so? They're going to get lifted by a helicopter, and then you'll have the USS John P. Murtha that they will arrive at. And then from there, they'll literally tow with cables the spacecraft behind. And with that, off they go to safety and to our next pursuit of the moon.
Yeah, I want to get a live look here at the USS Murtha, because I think one of our other cameras has it. Give me a moment here. There it is. You got to see me in between. That's how these buttons are all set up. You see one shot, me,
Right.
and then the next shot. But now we're looking at and you know what? What you're seeing here is just everybody aboard the USS Mirtha fixed on the water, watching this mission to now bring the astronauts back.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what we've seen, this is just a small glimpse of it, and just the Americans watching this transfixed on what it means for us as a country and humanity to get back on the moon eventually, right?
Well, yes, you nailed it on the head right there. It's a geopolitical victory on one hand, just as it was in 1969. It shows America's ingenuity. It shows its can-do spirit to other nations around the world. It's a demonstration of American exceptionalism, the strength and power we have and how we use it, in this case, for extraordinary scientific advancement. In this case, a game plan to colonize the moon with plans to use it as a launch pad to Mars, and so much more on the surface of the moon that we can get to in a moment.
Exactly. Now let's listen back in, actually. I want to listen to see if there's any kind of communications, what's going on NASA's side of this. What you're looking at right now is the live feed from NASA. We're seeing boats now heading out to the capsule, their Integrity, splashing down about, let's say, 15 minutes ago, 8:07 Eastern Time in the Pacific Ocean. Let's listen in.
Coordination for the power down of the vehicle that will initiate the actual recovery operation. The first boats with the Navy divers on board are standing by, waiting to close in on Integrity to begin the process of erecting the large inflatable raft that's called the front porch, that will be where the astronauts are extracted from, so that they can have a few minutes to get their land legs back before they're hoisted aboard the Navy helicopters for the flight back to the deck of the USS John P. Mirtha.
And Houston, please don't reply. NRD, very weak, but readable. Master Diver, we can hear, but they cannot hear us.
And we're listening into NASA's efforts to get out to the capsule there and eventually bring the astronauts, the four-person crew, eventually back to the USS Mirtha and eventually back to land. Craig, one of the things we've talked about, and we've had several experts on here talking about the impact of space, deep space, on the human body. This was one of several operatives, one of the several missions of this crew to learn more about the science behind deep space before they eventually get back onto the moon, right? This is one of the things that they'll be looking at over the next several days, that data that they collected.
Yes, and it was extensive, and this is something that we're going to have to figure out if we're going to stay on the moon long term. And with that, a number of experiments were conducted on their own bodies. There will be medical evaluations once they exit the capsule. And by the way, the recovery teams are already there. You're seeing a helicopter very nearby, but the inflatables are already in the vicinity.
Yep.
And they are heading that way, though you can't see them necessarily in the screen just yet. They're zooming out perhaps, and you may be able to see it soon. But yes, the big thrust of a lot of the experiments we've been seeing, not just on Artemis II with these 4 astronauts, but on the SpaceX crew missions, is the fact that astronauts have been consistently testing their own human biology and how it withstands long duration in space. That's been a big part of the crewed missions, not the only one. And the reason is because they are preparing for this. And you have to make sure, one, we can take care of our own bodies with the exposure to radiation, the elements, and so much more. And this is not a part of Artemis II, but you also have to make sure that you can sustain a food source as well, because it's not going to be easy once we get to that point to shuttle food back and forth. That's the plans of a long-term colony, greenhouses, things that the University of Florida is working on in Gainesville and so many other places across the state and all across the nation. And I should say this is something that also is inspiring Americans and perhaps people all around the world in a time of strife and sharp disagreement and war, just as we had in the late 1960s.
Absolutely. Now, I want to listen in. It looks like they're doing an interview aboard the USS Martha. Let's listen into NASA's feed right now.
And yeah, incredibly grateful too for our teams here on the John P. Martha right now.
Yeah, look at them behind us
We've
here.
got everybody. Hey, what do you guys think? We just brought some astronauts back from the moon, huh? Unbelievable. Thank you. Yeah, so grateful to the Navy, the sailors that are here, the NASA teams. I mean, this is a joint effort that's on their way right now. These recovery forces are getting out to our Orion spacecraft, to Integrity, get our astronauts back on the ship safely.
Yeah, and this is not just an accomplishment for NASA. This is an accomplishment for humanity. Again, a historic mission to the moon and back. How does this make you feel, and what do you hope people take away from this?
Well, I'll tell you, I think about the crew members that we've all had an opportunity to observe over the last 10 days, right? I mean, they're absolutely professional astronauts. I mean, wonderful communicators, almost poets. But then I think these were the ambassadors from humanity to the stars that we sent out there right now, and I can't imagine a better crew than the Artemis II crew that just completed a perfect mission right now. So yes, it's a huge moment for everybody, right? I mean, we are back in the business of sending astronauts to the moon, bringing them back safely, and to set up for a series more. I mean, this is not a once in a lifetime, which you hear sometimes around here. It's like, this was a once in a lifetime. No, it's not. This is just the beginning. We are going to get back into doing this with frequency, sending missions to the moon until we land on it in 2028 and start building our base.
Yeah, are we going to build on the momentum for Artemis III? I mean, it's just around the corner.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's, part of me too. Like, I can't wait to get the crew off of Integrity right now, but also getting Integrity back on this ship so we can start taking a look at it, because all that data is so precious to us right now. I mean, we are going to definitely want to take a good look at the thermal protection system. We're going to want to download all the data they couldn't transmit back to us and use that to inform Artemis III. But we're already making progress, right? You had SRB segments already showing up at KSC. Core stage for Artemis III is rolling out on April 20th. We're getting Mobile Launcher 1 back in vehicle assembly building. So yes, there is a lot to celebrate right now on a mission well accomplished for Artemis II, and at the same time, we got to start getting ready for 3.
Amazing. And last question, for people who joined us for all 10 days to see what we can accomplish together with our international partners, what do you think about the fact that we're going to keep doing this more and more and more?
It's incredibly exciting. I mean, yes, it's the contributions, like the best and brightest across the NASA workforce from across the country, our industry partners, our international partners. We had a Canadian Space Agency astronaut on board in Jeremy. We had the European Service Module. And you think, in the days leading up to this launch, I mean, 48 hours prior to launching Artemis II, I was meeting with the Italian Space Agency. We signed a memorandum of understanding to build a habitation module on the moon. I mean, you have countries, all of our allies and partners coming together saying, we are committed to this effort. We are returning to the moon. We're doing it to stay. We are building that enduring presence. We are going to master the skills on the surface of the moon so someday we can undertake missions to Mars. It's just an incredibly exciting time, and we're not going at it alone. We're bringing everybody along with us.
Absolutely. And speaking of everyone, one more time, we're going to ask the crew here, you guys ready to land on the moon? Awesome. I love that. Okay, well, thank you so much, Administrator. Appreciate you being here. We're, of course, going to stay on to watch the crew get extracted from Orion, so stay tuned, and we'll see you back here shortly.
Well, that was a live interview aboard the USS Martha, and if that doesn't give you goosebumps, Craig, listening to that crew, listening to the staff from NASA, those folks that are out there waiting for them to come back home, it's just absolutely incredible, right?
It is incredible, especially when you take into account just how near flawless this entire mission has been. When I say near flawless, there have been issues, but they've been so minor in the scheme of things. One of them, I believe, is transpiring as we speak. The satellite phone inside the capsule is maybe not working as well.
Yeah, that's what you heard them say, right?
Communicating with the recovery team. That's the first thing I picked up on.
Yeah.
But don't blow that up. That's a very picky-pick kind of thing.
Sure.
In the grander scheme, as was the minor issues they were having with the toilet. The toilet was something new, by the way. They never had that in the Apollo days, and a water There were some minor communication glitches, but the propulsion worked. The SLS, whether or not they continue to use it for long-term missions back and forth to the moon remains to be seen, but the SLS performed perfectly. And then you have the propulsion. There were 2 planned corrections that they could have made that they didn't even execute because they didn't need to. Everything was so precise on something that needed such precision. The European service module, which was abandoned just a few minutes ago, worked perfectly. And of course, the Orion worked perfectly, those minor issues aside as well. And this is telling us that combined with the safety of the crew, the return safely off the Pacific, not far from San Diego, that everything went about as well as it could possibly go. And that does take us on a path to 2027, as the administrator was saying, where they're excited to launch the next mission. And that one will be to test lunar landers, presuming those landers are ready.
Absolutely. You know, some of the things that, in addition to the issues with the communications that we heard, some other things that he said in that interview just a moment ago. This is not just an accomplishment for NASA, but an accomplishment for humanity. And these were the ambassadors from humanity to the stars. And he couldn't imagine a better crew to be communicating with the world about what they're seeing, right?
And it's a remarkably diverse crew. I mean, these are trailblazers as well, extraordinarily talented and wicked smart, each in their own right, and extremely well trained. But you have the first black man who went around the moon. You have the first woman who just went around the moon, the first Canadian who just went around the moon. And I think that is setting the stage symbolically for the type of diversity that we are going to see once we, not just the United States, but other nations as well. In fact, some have already sent some probes to the moon in places where I think we all want to land and colonize. We'll have to cooperate and we'll have to work together for the greater good. And we've learned that the moon is not just a dead, dusty rock, as many may have thought in the 1960s. The probes of 2008 and 2009 revealed loads of ice beneath the lunar surface, and that is such a huge game changer. That is a path to solving our energy woes here on Earth, to cleaning planet Earth, to prevent it from further environmental degradation, and it's also a launch pad to Mars because of what we can do with that ice.
It speaks to what we don't know is out there. We know something could be out there as far as on the planet, on Mars, on the moon. We just don't know exactly everything that we could learn from getting there, and this is a big step toward getting some of those answers.
We don't know what we don't know, and there are a lot of people who may say, and you're going to hear them say, well, they're not going to have those landers ready next year, so Artemis 3 is going to get pushed back. Landing on the moon 2028, come on, you know they're not going to get there. Look how long it took to get from Artemis 1 to Artemis 2.
Right.
But I'm telling you, if you don't know what you don't know, you know what's helping us find our way? It's the rapid escalation of the capabilities of artificial intelligence. Look how much it has grown in the course of just a few months. Consider where it will be in another year or two. And that's something that's going to augment our capabilities, our ability to do huge things. This is something we never had before. We have an agent, not just a tool, an agent that can help us get there. And you also have a race in artificial intelligence that will help in our race to the moon and then our race to beyond. And in addition to the explosion of artificial intelligence and all the potential that has in helping us find our way faster and faster and perhaps colonizing sooner than many people may think, the moon and beyond, you also have the coming age of quantum computers, too, that will move exponentially faster, compute exponentially faster than anything we have today, that will transform our world in a lot of ways people just cannot imagine. It offers tremendous breakthroughs, I think, in health and medicine, and also tremendous breakthroughs, I would expect, in our pursuits of deep space, and that would include colonizing the moon, offloading our data centers to it, and then exploring Mars and beyond and finding who knows what.
Boy, that sounds like the stuff of science fiction, but you know, it's now. We're not that far off, right? I want to dip back in here to NASA's coverage, see if they're saying anything interesting and how this eventual extraction effort is going. So let's listen into that.
Sure.
Well, I swear, Craig, they were just talking a minute ago. Isn't that how that always works? They stop talking as soon as we go out to them. But they'll have plenty to say, in just a little bit. We'll check back in with them in a minute. But there's still so much to talk about here. Some other things that they mentioned just a moment ago in that interview, that we are back in the business of not just sending astronauts to the moon, but also bringing them back safely. We saw going into this splashdown the importance of that heat shield. He just mentioned it again. They need to look at that data to make sure that the heat shield worked as well as they hoped it would, because they made some adjustments going into Artemis II that they learned from Artemis I, right?
They did, but here's the thing, Aaron. The heat shield is flawed. Isaacman said that before this landing. The heat shield is flawed. They learned that after the return of Artemis I. And in testing it, they said, well, they acknowledge it's flawed, but it will still work fine. It still is safe. They ran so many simulations. They said that much. And that's why there was some controversy here. But nonetheless, they're going to look very carefully to see to what extent chunks may be blown out of it. Because they determined if chunks are blown out, it'll still be fine. But they want to make sure for future missions. They didn't want to push this one back because they figured they had the safety margin. And on top of that, they changed the return and the re-entry. They came in with a more narrow angle relative to the horizon so that it would skip by something they didn't want to do back in the olden days,
right.
But so that it would skip and so it would pop back up, give it a chance to cool before it gets a second burst of heat and re-enters that way. That was to give them a wider safety margin. But what did I just say? That's not the way they did it back in the Apollo days. That's not optimal. I think what they would prefer is to have perhaps a modified heat shield if, in fact, they see the same kind of not just disintegration and burning, which is normal, but chunks just coming out of the heat shield in ways they did not expect the first time around. And if that happens the second go round, I think that there will be more attention placed on figuring out the physics behind that. They know what is happening. I don't think they know exactly why that was happening. That was based on some of the recent discussions with the engineers. They just figured they figure it's going to be safe. But I think that will the examination of the heat shield and what kind of damage it took or didn't take. What am I saying? Didn't take. That's going to play a large role in determining to what degree they revisit that or they figure that they're good to go, and then it's on to the next step of testing the landers.
All right, let's listen back in here. I hear them talking. Let's listen in again.
Yeah, 15 seconds. Once again, from Flight Dynamics, a splashdown time of 7:07 and 27 seconds p.m. Central Time. That would equate to a mission elapsed time of 9 days, 1 hour, 32 minutes, and 15 seconds.
That's some pretty interesting, interesting data right there that I think we can all wrap our minds around. 9+ days, almost 10 days for the full mission to the far side of the moon. Craig, I got to say, that those images that we were seeing from the far side, while they're doing this, I'm gonna actually pull those up here. So I think we got those beforehand loaded up just in case we had a little down moment. Yeah, let's look at some of those pictures that they sent back there from the moon. And when you see these, it's just absolutely incredible when we're looking at these images again. It doesn't get old. And
no,
seeing those images of the moon from the far side, that remind our viewers, that is very rare. No human eyes don't see that often in person.
Well, we've seen them with probes, but you're right. Human eyes don't. They just did 4 days ago. But keep in mind, we don't see the moon spin. We're only seeing the same side of the moon every time we look up in the sky. It doesn't spin relative to the Earth, that is. Right. And so therefore, the far side or the dark side, no, we haven't been able to see that, not with human eyes in more than 50 years until now. And then when you see it, it looks very different, doesn't it? It's how can that be? Well, you have to remember that on the outside, it's absorbing many more hits, and with that, it's going to be much more pocked than the side facing the Earth. So, we now see the dark side of the moon, and Pink Floyd predicted this correctly now with human eyes. And it's also exciting to see that this is actually a kind of a broken off piece of ancient Earth, because there was a collision between Earth and a planet I believe they call Theia, and then it knocked off a huge chunk of early ancient Earth, and that's what formed the moon, which is why the moon happens to have beneath the surface a good deal of frozen water beneath it, and why we're discovering we can do so much more than plant an American flag on it as we did and ride around in moon buggies. But this is going to be an answer to many of the things we've been trying to solve for a very long time.
Yeah, and what we're watching right now is those rescue boats are getting closer and closer and approaching the Integrity capsule, where those 4 astronauts are still inside there. We knew that this was going to take a little bit of time. We're going to be live on the air until about 9:30, 9:35. Hopefully we'll see those astronauts, make their way out of there. It's going to give you goosebumps when you see that happen, right?
It really will. I'm not sure it'll be around 9:30, 9:35. I think it might be... I'm just looking at the plan. It might be closer to 15 minutes or so after that, but it could.
Okay.
We're
hoping.
So let's. We're hoping. I think it's possible. And again, this is moving slowly because they understand that you don't want to literally rock the boat too much, and we know that the astronauts are safe inside, and all is well and good except for a spotty satellite phone. And so with that. This is a methodical operation. They are emphasizing checking and double checking and safety, and they plan for this. We certainly have a rich legacy of doing something very similar with the recovery engineers from the Apollo days, including Milt Heflin, who I recently interviewed, who kind of took me through the process of what is happening and what this entails, that they have trained for years, and they have simulated for years. And of all the training the astronauts went through, they also went through an awful lot of this. So this is not something that they're doing the first time around. Yes, the United States did this many times a few decades ago, but they too have done this, simulated about as close as you can possibly get. So this has all been very well rehearsed.
Now, here was the timeline that we saw just within the last hour or so, maybe literally 2 hours. At 7:33, the Orion crew module separated from the service module, and that's what exposed the heat shield that we've been talking about, where at that point temperatures are reaching about 3,000 degrees. Following the separation, the Orion performed an 18-second crew module raise burn, beginning to set the proper entry angle to align the heat shield with the atmospheric interface. Right now I'm reading this straight from NASA's website here, which is basically the timeline that they expected going in, and it seemed like they nailed it. 8:03 p.m., around 22,000 feet in altitude, the first set of parachutes deployed, slowing, stabilizing the capsule as Orion neared the splashdown. 8:04, 1 minute later, at around 6,000 feet, the next set of parachutes deployed, reducing Orion's speed to less than 136 miles an hour. Think about how much they slowed down. How they had to go from going, I think it was 25,000 miles an hour down to 136 miles an hour in a period, in a matter of minutes. That's incredible.
Incredible, and how it must feel as well. I've heard it described. Of course, you and I will never know, but it is aggressive, that's for sure, and also remarkable in terms of our ability to do that. And you gave a point-by-point breakdown of what happened, and they knew that was going to happen. They knew exactly where it was going to happen. They had it timed down to the second. How did they know that? How did they know that? It speaks to the value of physics education, and certainly in the state of Florida, that is something that we have used and leveraged to build not just spacecraft, but incredible machines all along the I-4 corridor with so many contractors working on the space program. And it speaks to the value of science, physics, and with study and calculation. And remember, in the Apollo days, they were able to do this without the benefit of computers as we know them today, that you can do extraordinary things, honestly, with high school physics. And you take it a few steps and look at what you can get.
I know, and you said, how do they know that? Because they're a lot smarter than we are. I mean, these are the smartest men and women in the world figuring out how to get a crew of 4 people into outer space to the far side of the moon and then back to Earth safely. Right now, we're looking at, I think, a dual shot here, one from the helicopters hovering above the rescue effort, and then maybe a little bit closer, probably 2 helicopter shots, to be honest, a little closer to the ground or to the surface of the water, zoomed further in there of the one of the rescue boats circling the Integrity capsule. And we'll listen back in. I'm not sure if there's any audio yet, but it comes and goes. We'll just check back in for just a moment and see what they're saying. I think it's safe to say, Craig, they are focused on their rescue effort. We're not hearing a lot of communication. It could also be because they're trying to communicate with the astronauts inside, and they were having that satellite phone issue that you mentioned, that we heard them mention just a little bit ago, right?
Yeah, but they're powered down. They have a beat on this. So yes, there are efforts of communication, but there's not, frankly, a whole lot that they have to say at this point. They've rehearsed this time and time again with simulations about as close as you can get. They all know what one another is doing in the capsule, waiting to exit, as well as the recovery teams all around. So at this point, it might be like, and this may be not the best analogy, I don't mean to be flip, but like an NFL play call. Once you break huddle, you know exactly where everybody's going to go, what they're going to do, and you have a similar formation in this case where this is not just willy-nilly. They are in exact positions where they have trained. They know exactly what to do, so they're not deciding what to do, which doesn't require as much communication at this point. It's just a matter of executing the play.
Yeah, and I want to go back through here, sort of what we've talked about over the last 10 days. During the mission, we saw this astronaut lift off from the Kennedy Space Center on April 1st at about 6:35 p.m., sending humans toward the moon for the first time since 1972 during the mission. Astronauts completed a historic lunar flyby. We talked about that so many times, marking humanity's first return to the vicinity of the moon for the first time in more than 50 years. And then throughout that flight, the crews, teams on the ground were evaluating Orion's systems in the deep space environment. They lost communications for that moment on the far side of the moon. They did a series of tests in which the astronauts directly operated and interacted with the spacecraft. And now we are here, and what we're watching here, it looks like, for the first time, the rescue efforts have reached the capsule, and it looks like they might be trying to approach the door. I'm going to punch the audio up here, Craig. We're going to listen, see if we can hear anything.
At this hour, some 41 minutes following splashdown, the vehicle has been powered down. There's no hazardous gas emanating from the vehicle. That's why the first team of recovery personnel has been able to pull alongside Integrity. And the reports continue to come in that the 4 astronauts are in excellent shape.
Well, that is great to hear. The astronauts are in excellent shape. No hazardous gas, they said, no hazardous emissions coming from the capsule, and that, as we just learned, was what was taking this long. Why it has taken this long for a crew to approach the astronauts, to approach the capsule, because they wanted to make sure it was safe, right?
Yeah, they're working down a checklist. That was a very low probability, but they want to make sure, and they're working. When I say methodically, that's what I mean. And so you have mission control running through all of their checks, as well as the recovery team. And they're making sure, one, that the circumstance and situation is safe, but they're also relaying that across the horn from one side of the nation to the other.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just so fascinating to watch this. You have to think about what the astronauts are thinking right now in there. I'm sure they want to poke their heads out. They want to give everybody a big wave, and what that's going to be like for them and for the crew on the USS Mertha, and for those of us watching at home, I keep using the word goosebumps, Craig, but it is the kind of thing that up until now we haven't seen very often because of the historic nature of this mission.
I don't know what the astronauts are thinking. I look forward to hearing what they have to say. But as you said, that they're going to be very eager to step out and wave thumbs up or big smile, what have you. But I rather suspect they might be interested in just sitting in there and soaking it in. This is such an extraordinary success and victory for the United States, for them, in a show of what we can accomplish all around the world and what we can and will do beyond this world. Imagine when you've accomplished something like that, you might just want to be able to sit there, relax, and understand this is a true moment and a turning point in history. So if I were in their shoes and in those seats, I might not be that eager to jump out. Yeah, you've been in there for 10 days, but what's 10 days and a few minutes longer to catch your breath after what was an invigorating return home, I'm sure.
For sure.
To be able to just soak it in and understand that you did it, to look at your three colleagues, the four of them together, and recognize they did something truly special. Their time in a matter of minutes will come, but this is that moment in history. You will never get this back.
No. You
never will.
It just crossed my mind, just because I'm thinking of, I could never compare anything in my life to what they're experiencing right now. But, you sometimes when you get home from a long trip, you think, well, earlier today I was just, in another city. And now here I am a few hours later back in Tampa. They were in space hours ago. I know it's kind of ridiculous to say it like that, but they were in outer space just a few hours ago. They woke up at 11:35, or they woke up before 11:35 this morning. And then at around that time, they had their final hours in space preparing for the physical stress of coming home, started going through that checklist that we had mentioned. And here they are, roughly, let's say, 10 hours later, off the coast of San Diego in the water, waiting to get back on land, on Earth. It is just mind-boggling to think of it that way.
Hours ago, they were in outer space, and just 4 days ago, they were on the far side of the moon and more than 4,000 or 5,000 miles beyond it. Imagine how far you have traveled, what that says about our capabilities, but what it's going to say, again, because our goal is not just to fly in great distances around the moon, but it's to do so much more. And I'll go and take a moment to explain why it's going to lead to so much more. I spoke earlier about the ice beneath the lunar surface that is in great abundance in the South Pole in particular. Well, we have the ability to use solar power on the moon. So you erect a solar farm, you then use solar power to split that ice, to split the hydrogen and the oxygen, to electrolyze it. And when you do that, you get huge bursts of steam that can power a colony, or huge bursts of steam that can power another spacecraft on a launch pad from the moon to Mars. Now, we don't electrolyze water on Earth because you have to use more energy to put into it than what you get out of it. But with nonstop solar power on the moon, once that is set up, you are good to go to convert this ice into a source of fuel. And when you do that, you can also mine the moon for helium-3. Helium-3, although there may not be a tremendous amount of it, is going to be in tremendous demand. We believe that we know for sure that it can be used in quantum computing, and we talked about the importance of that a few minutes ago, but it also is believed to be a critical component based on the science we have today of fusion power on Earth, cold fusion, that we first successfully tested in a lab some 3+ years ago. So this is a way to get us on the path to abundant, substantially cheaper energy here on Earth that can serve all of our needs at the same time that we can then build mining colonies on the moon and then use that fuel source and other types of energy as well to ultimately move data centers that are certainly in extraordinary demand in the age of AI from the surface of the Earth, where it consumes tremendous power, into space and onto the moon. And that can help clean our planet and provide us with the data needs that we will have, which will continue to grow, right? And those are just two particular examples of how we can harness the moon
Absolutely. Hey,
to
Craig,
our advantage.
Real
Yes.
quick, I want to jump in. We just saw the hatch open up. Let's listen in live now to NASA's feed.
And again, with just 3,000 yards separating us, great views from the bow here. You can see now that side hatch is open. One of the Navy personnel is about to get inside there. In they go. In total, 4 will go into Orion. So it'll be a little bit of a tight squeeze, but the goal is to have a recovery personnel with each astronaut assessing them. Boat's getting closer now. Again, that one that's right up against Orion, those are the divers that will go in to the spacecraft to check on each of the astronauts. These other boats will begin doing a number of things, putting on that stabilization collar onto Orion, building that front porch. Eventually they will retrieve the parachutes, as well as tow Orion back to the well deck of the recovery ship here. And so as we wait for the Navy and NASA personnel to get their assessments of the crew inside of Orion, why don't we toss it back to Rob for an update?
Yes, thank you, Megan. Here in Mission Control, Flight Director Rick Henry.
So what you're hearing there, the audio was a little bit difficult to hear, but what we just heard NASA say is divers are going in to check on each of the astronauts.
Yep.
Eventually they're going to tow the capsule back to the deck of the USS Merthyr, but right now there's some wellness checks, I'm sure, going on of each of the astronauts. But it sounds like we're minutes away from seeing Commander Reed Wiseman and astronauts Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen emerge from that capsule from the hatch door that has now been open for about a couple of minutes, Craig. And, you know, we heard just a little bit before that they are all well, they are all healthy.
Yep.
And, you know, this is as great, I think, a news as we could have hoped for.
Oh, all the way around. And at the end here, of course, we see that they're healthy, that they are well, and you're absolutely right. We'll see them in a matter of minutes, within the hour. Within the hour. You know, again, I keep stressing they will take their time. They've been to the moon and back, beyond the moon and back.
Exactly.
So I don't think they definitely need to do any more rushing once they are here to verify. And this is consistent with what we've seen. In fact, I watched some of the recoveries of the Apollo missions just to try to get a mental note in my mind before I saw this. And this is consistent with what we saw then in terms of the general time frame of checking out the crew members, communicating with them, and the cool part afterwards is, and you see this process beginning as we speak, as they are moving the craft, when they literally tow it behind once they get moving.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's listen in again, see if they're saying anything as they communicate with. This is between NASA. We've got Mission Control still watching this. We've got these rescue efforts on the USS Merthyr and these rescue vessels now that are circling around the Integrity capsule. One has, I believe, hitched itself to or anchored itself to the capsule so it doesn't, separate. And divers are now have now entered the capsule and are checking the health status, which we've been told is as good as they had hoped. So let's listen in again and see what they're saying. Yeah, all eyes right now on that rescue effort, and you're right, Craig. This is not a fast process. You know, we see the hatch door open, we all get excited that they're gonna jump out and that they're gonna get pulled onto that raft and then sailed away to the deck of the Mertha. But that's just not the way it works. There is a big process. There's a series of checklists that they have to go through to make sure everything is according to plan, right?
Yes, and to just reiterate what's going to happen, they're going to be removed one by one from the capsule to a helicopter. And that's going to take them to the Mertha. Then it's going to pull the capsule behind it after the astronauts have left and are safely on the Mertha. That's when it gets towed, and that's going to be cool to see. Now, that is different than what we've been accustomed to see recently, because in modern times, we have the SpaceX Crew Dragon, and that process is a little different. What happens there is that the craft gets lurched up onto a ship, and then the astronauts get out. Well, the engineering of this is a bit different and harkens back to the Apollo days, which is why the sequence of events will be a little different, but the outcome will be the same.
All right, let's listen back in again and see what the communications are from the NASA live feed. All right, Craig, let's talk a little bit about, you've mentioned a few times the eventual plan to land back on the moon and eventually to Mars. We're, I think, about 2 years away. We've heard about the plan to have a mission to the moon, to land on the moon and put humans back on the moon. It's hard to, I think, grasp the next eventual step, getting to Mars. Have they said how far off that plan is?
Not specifically. And they've only said Artemis 4 2028. That's not locked in stone, but it certainly is achievable based on what we have seen here. The next question is, when do we get from that point to building a colony on the moon? You have optimists who say that will take us into the 2030s and that this is going to take a life of its own very quickly. We just said you don't see this very often, what you're watching right now. You have to go back 50 plus years. But here's the thing, Aaron, you're going to start seeing it much more often based on what Administrator Isaacman has told us, because one of his concerns that he first raised was that going from Artemis 1 in 2022 to this in 2026 is too darn long, and we've got to be able to compress that because you lose muscle memory, because we have a real plan that we've got to implement, a big, bold one, too, that in many respects is a far more giant leap than what we did with Apollo 11. You have to do that with regular missions so you don't have fall off in your process and what you're doing, and that's why the plan is now to have at least one a year going forward. And then the long-term plan, and the optimists will start putting this into the 2030s, which is not that long from now. Keep in mind, it's 2026 now, to building out the beginnings of a colony and then taking it from there where you can use the moon as a launch pad to Mars. Now, some people may be thinking, wait a minute, why can't you use the Earth as a launch pad to Mars? You can do that. And they're simultaneous are plans to take us in that direction. But from what has been learned thus far, and Dr. Phil Metzger at UCF is one of the pioneers on this research, is that once you build out the infrastructure on the moon, you can use the moon and launch a crewed mission to Mars far more cheaply and more efficiently than you can do from Earth. And so, yes, you've got to scale up, but once you do that, it will make far more sense economically to send astronauts to Mars from the moon than it would from the Earth to the moon. And by the way, the same holds true for satellites as well. Once you build out, it'll be far more efficient, cheaper, better, faster to launch communication satellites and others from the surface of the moon than from the surface of the Earth. And with that, that's going to create, I think, a whole new renaissance in communications, in computing, and our understanding of the universe and how we harness energy and fuel.
Yeah, and that's what you were talking about when they opened that hatch just a few minutes ago. First of all, I want to thank our viewers for keeping with us here on Fox 13. Plus, we are streaming live throughout the evening here for several hours as we watch the Artemis II come back to Earth and splash down off the coast of San Diego, and these rescue efforts that have been taking place. Let's dip back in here to NASA's coverage. It looks like they do have some folks talking. It's been a few tries and they've been silenced, but I think we're going to have some luck on this one. Let's try it again.
How does it feel, I mean, your team, to be part of a mission that's returning astronauts from the moon in more than 50 years?
We all feel extremely honored to be a part of this, as well as bigger missions for the Navy and joining up with NASA to do great things.
And do you feel like you and your team are ready?
Yes, that's very ready.
Cool. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Once again, the recovery operations are continuing out in the Pacific. We shortly should see that life raft, the front porch erected alongside the side hatch of the vehicle.
All right, the feed from NASA has a little bit of audio trouble there, so it's a little difficult to hear what they were going to say. But we'll keep trying. If it gets worked out. We're hearing bits and pieces of what they're saying, and they're kind of giving us a play-by-play of what this effort is looking like out there. And joining us still, who's been with us for the last hour or so, is Fox 13 political editor Craig Patrick. Craig, you have kind of become also Fox 13's NASA expert and space expert. You were there for the launch, and you're here for the return home. What's this like for you?
It's recognition and it's confirmation that we have found our way again. You have some Apollo engineers who say we should have done this 50 years ago. Knowing what we know today, we should have done this 50 years ago. But we transitioned from trips back and forth to the moon, having defeated the Soviet Union in that race to the moon and shown our ingenuity in that sense, to thinking, okay, what do we do next? Well, let's focus on low Earth orbit and a bunch of communication satellites, which certainly ushered in the information revolution in which we find ourselves. But had we stayed the course, instead of going to the shuttle missions and continued the pursuit of the moon, we may already be a far sight further along in terms of colonizing it, in terms of using its resources to better lives here on Earth, and in finding the answers to the greatest questions of the universe. Where do we fit within it? Where do we come from? What's the origin? You have the James Webb Space Telescope that is revealing real mysteries that maybe we don't know as much about the formation of the universe and how it all came to be than we think, or under something is off a little bit. And with that, we can then, with a greater pursuit of the moon, because the moon is kind of like Earth's attic, you don't have erosion, you have an ability to have a much greater understanding of how it was formed, and with it, perhaps the Earth as well. These are things that will help us find answers to the greatest mysteries of existence, the same time that advanced technology will help us accelerate our path to building a permanent base on the moon, and then we can use that permanent base on the moon to harness energy. And there are many ways that we can do that. We talked about helium-3 a few minutes ago. We talked about electrolyzing the ice as well. You also have the potential, and Isaac Minnis discussed this too, of using nuclear reactors on the moon. And with that, there is the potential. Some of this is theoretical. Some of it has been mapped out mathematically to be able to beam energy by microwave back to Earth as well. In many different ways, you have the capability of using the moon to power human operations on Earth at the same time that computers, artificial intelligence data centers will require more and more energy, and this will help us power those things, and those things will help us answer the greatest questions and speed our path to getting there. And remember, I would take you back to the days of the Wright brothers before Kitty Hawk. How many people thought just a few years later that we would be flying contraptions with human beings on them, and then just a few years after that we would have commercial flights, and then we would have fleets of commercial flights all around the world, and then not too far after that we're flying into space and onto the moon in the 1960s. Who would have thought that at the beginning of the 20th century? Right. Who would have thought that just in the days before the Wright brothers? So I give that as an example to remember that what we're talking about, Aaron, might sound far-fetched to people when we talk about building a permanent moon base, when we talk about harnessing the energy in the moon, when we talk about offloading data centers, when we talk about using the moon as a launch pad to Mars. I'm sure there's people saying, yeah, right, that'll never fly, which is exactly what they said about the Wright brothers years before they ushered in the age of commercial aviation.
Exactly. I mean, we don't, as you said before, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we're capable of until we try. And this has shown the latest in human achievement here. And we're going to see it again as the years go on. When you say, and you just sort of explained this a bit in your previous answer, when you say a lunar colony, what does that mean?
Largely, it will be robotic in the course of time. It's not going to require a significant amount of manpower, but it's going to include human beings who live full-time on the moon, or at least for much longer durations than we have on the International Space Station, far longer than that. They will cultivate gardens, greenhouses, in order to sustain themselves. And in doing that, they will be the pioneers on the moon who build the mining robots, who build the machinery that will burr beneath the lunar surface, that will extract the ice, and then that comparatively small number of colonists, pioneers, will then use that to robotically engage a mining colony that produces fuel, and with that you will have more and more cargo that will continue to land on the moon. That will build out the lunar pad, and with that, you're on the path again to having a spaceport on the moon, like we have at Cape Canaveral, like we have on Merritt Island with Kennedy Space Center. Perhaps a good bit smaller, yes, but still capable of doing extraordinary things and going to Mars and going beyond Mars as well, in which we will be explorers searching for other forms of life, biological life, but also explorers seeking better ways to improve life here on Earth and find additional sources of energy. There's so much more that we know of outside of Earth, and so much more we probably aren't even aware of yet. And in doing that, that will help us solve, again, the mysteries of where we came from and ultimately where we're going.
All right, and that's the hope, obviously. Let's listen in again to the rescue efforts here. And the recovery efforts of the astronauts from the NASA feed.
Hover above the front porch, about 40 feet above the front porch. A Navy recovery specialist will be hoisted down into the front porch. We'll connect to the first astronaut, which we're expecting to be Christina. And then Helo 2 comes around, picks up Jeremy, while Helo 1 stays above head, and then Helo 1 will come back in for another astronaut, and then Helo 2 for the last astronaut, and and then back to the flight deck here on the recovery ship.
And we're listening into NASA's live feed. What we didn't hear, I think right before we took the audio there, which is, again, a little spotty, a little hard to understand, but one of the things that they said was that all 4 are green, which means all astronauts are healthy and safe and doing as well as they had hoped. So that's good to hear, which means it seems like when it's time to extract them and get them out of the capsule, there shouldn't hopefully be any further holdups, or there hasn't been any holdups, but there's nothing to hold them back from doing that. Let's go through, Craig, one of just what we've seen over the last 10 days. It's been quite a mission. We saw the lunar flyby just several days ago, and there's a timeline I'm looking at on NASA's website of the lunar flyby that we saw. Let's also look at some of these photos that we saw come in. And I'm going to keep an eye on that live feed also to make sure we don't miss anything important. But let's look at some of those photos that they sent back from the moon as they were flying by. It's just absolutely incredible images. One of the things NASA has said is that the reason that we want humans to look at the far side of the moon is because we can observe things that robotics cannot. That it's important for us to see it with our own eyes. And hopefully, Craig, that's exactly what the kind of data, not just the mathematical data and the scientific data, but also the visual data that they can just tell other scientists and relate back to NASA, right?
That's part of it. That's a big part of it. There's an academic sense to it, but it goes far beyond that. It's practical. It's pragmatic because, yes, you need human eyes to do what? To have a better idea of where to land. Now, there are plans to focus on the South Pole, and they have narrowed down the potential landing spots to just a few. But being able to observe the moon from that distance, from that vantage point, to see it from all sides, the sides that human eyes don't see, they went through a great deal of geological training for a reason, because those types of human observations can help advance NASA's plans to figure out exactly how to navigate and where ultimately to land and what ultimately to build and where it can all lead.
Exactly. All right, let's head back out live here to the capsule, to the Integrity capsule, which is still there. You know, they've got, we saw the divers board the capsule from one of the vessels in through the hatch just a little bit ago. And at this point, they've done at least an initial well check, an initial safety check on the astronauts. And from here, we'll see where it goes. So let's listen back in and see what they're saying there. Was there something you wanted to add, Craig?
Well, no, just a hunch, because I had looked at a readout of what was anticipated. I thought they would be a little further along than they are. One thing that I'm not seeing is what they call the front porch. Okay. That's that inflatable lip I was telling you about, and that further stabilizes it, and that's what the astronauts, it helps them get out.
Got it.
And so for whatever reason, they have fallen up behind a little bit on that, at least on what I think I know. Meanwhile, that's not stopping the Navy divers who have medical training from getting inside the capsule. So there have been 8 people inside the capsule. You have the 4 astronauts, and for each one of them, an individual Navy diver who performed the health checks, and that's how we knew that they were well. And then the next step is to put that lip around it, what they call the front porch, because that's kind of what it is. You step out onto it, and then you get out. That is what has not deployed. Whether it might be the winds or the currents, or they're just taking a little extra time. It's a little hard. Video's a little muddy to see, but it looks as if that's what they might be. I think it is what they're working on as we speak.
Yeah, I think you're right. You see that there's something, I guess, that they're bringing over to the capsule that looks like it's on the front end of one of the vessel on the left-hand side of our screen here. And maybe that's what you're talking about, the front porch, as you said, that they're going to inflate and then attach to stabilize the capsule a little bit more. So we maybe in the next, we'll be on for another 15 minutes or so. We may not see, by that I mean Fox 13 Plus, and then we're going to continue our coverage into our evening newscast. We'll go with Live Now after us, and then our evening newscast will take over from there, Mark and Allie. But right, I think you're right. It's just a little bit behind. We may not see the astronauts emerge from that capsule within the next 15 minutes, but it is going to happen.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I got excited. I think I see it.
You see it now?
Well, it's not inflated yet, but it looks as if
I think
you're
right.
I
see what you're talking about. It's off to the right of the screen. Well, now they've changed shots. It's off to the side of the screen, depending on which angled shot that we're looking at the time.
That's right. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I got excited about that. I'm seeing movement, and I know that it's that looks to be it.
Okay, well that's good.
Based on images that I've seen, so we're back on track. So it looks as if they fell maybe a few minutes behind. That's right.
Yep. And you mentioned 8 people in this lunar capsule. It's only about 330 cubic feet in there. That's the size of just 2 minivans, I think was the comparison that I heard. So you've got 8 people at one time in there, 4 astronauts and the 4 dive team, the 4 members of the dive team in there who are doing health and safety checks on the astronauts. It's got to be pretty cramped, you'd think, right?
Oh, it's cramped, but I don't think they mind.
Probably
I think they
not.
can have a clown car in there and not mind. I bet they're just absolutely extraordinarily excited and high as they can be at this point. And I think it's the more the merrier, knowing that they are all healthy and well, and I'm sure they're in communication and being told that front porch is coming together. And I see, in fact, there it is. It's all coming together now. So yes. So it is crowded in there. You're right. It's been described as somewhere between a very large minivan or 2 standard-sized minivans is what it is, but shaped more like a cone.
Yeah.
And yes, so it's a tight fit, but engineered to hold specifically 4, but 8 can squeeze in there at the end here. And
you know what? Hey, I have a minivan, and this just looks like it has more headroom. So there's enough room for them. There's enough room for them to get around in there. Like you said, go ahead.
A minivan with a water dispenser and a toilet.
That's right. Exactly. We talked a little bit earlier with a scientist from UCF who has his expertise is in deep space or just the impact of space on the human body. One of the things he said is that this isn't just they're not going to get their Earth legs, so to speak, back right away. This could take a matter of days, maybe weeks, before they start feeling like they can walk more naturally and feeling the gravity of Earth again. That's which I found interesting.
Yeah. Well, think about it when we spend time on the water, especially if you've ever been on a long boat ride, not a cruise per se, but a smaller boat, and you get disembarkment sickness when you get off. Your knees are still kind of wobbly. I mean, that's psychological. Here you have psychological issues, and you have real physical issues of being outside the Earth's atmosphere, and you bet that's going to make some adjustments. I mean, you are think about this. When you wake up in the morning, your height is slightly different than it is at the end of the day. You're at your tallest when you first wake up in the morning by a little bit, because that's Earth doing a number on you, affecting your body in ways you don't think about. And when you're away from it from 10 days in a very different alien environment, then yes, it is going to wear on you. And it does take, I didn't know, you said a couple of weeks, I didn't know how long, but I do know that yes, you definitely have adjustments physically and otherwise once you return. And that's just in low Earth orbit here. And certainly for those who have been on the space station, I've heard them speak to that. Here, though, you have something, again, going far beyond low Earth orbit.
All right, you're watching a live feed from NASA of the Artemis II's return to Earth. The splashdown happening at 8:07 this evening. The crew safe and healthy after having spent more than 9, almost 10 days in outer space, going deeper than any man or woman has ever gone before. Let's listen in again to this live feed from NASA.
Again, all this activity happening just 3,000 yards away from the ship. So that means this will be a very quick flight back on the helicopters for the crew. 2-3 minutes, and then we'll be back here on the ship. Okay, saw a thumbs up from one of the personnel on the front porch. It looks like they are now getting ready to the Air Rescue Vest, ARV. And so this is the harness that each crew member will get into in order to be hoisted into the helicopters. Again, this helicopter is hovering just about 40 feet above the front porch when they're ready to pick up each crew member.
So we saw, Craig, that's the inflated front porch, as you mentioned, that's now attached. We saw someone on there give a thumbs up, probably to the chopper overhead that's going to come in and eventually be there for the astronauts when they emerge from inside that capsule. But I think first you're going to see the medical team that went in there come out. So they may be the first people to emerge from that. So we're going to get excited, but we won't see the astronauts right away.
I'll still be excited.
Right.
I'll be excited as well. And once they are taken from the capsule to the Mertha, they're going to be heading to Houston. They'll be at Johnson, and then there'll be a really important step coming up at 10:30 this evening. So please stay tuned after you watch our coverage here on Fox 13 Plus with Fox 13 News and online with the Fox local app, because that's when Johnson and NASA, they're going to give us an update and far more details on the success of the mission and what is actually transpiring behind the scenes as we watch this historic moment unfold.
It's just incredible that we get to be, witnesses to history. The first time that we're all seeing a trip return. We're repeating ourselves. I realize this, but it bears repeating because it is the most incredible trip to space that we've seen in over 50 years, and it's setting the stage for what's going to be, the manned missions to the moon and potentially in our lifetimes missions to Mars, if we're lucky enough to live that long. So right now, we're watching the extraction efforts. As we said, Craig, it's going to be first the medical team that went in. After that, it'll be the astronauts. That's probably going to happen probably several minutes or maybe 20 to 30 minutes at least away from that, I think is what you had the timeline more, I think, in check than I did at the beginning of this. And then from there, the astronauts will board a helicopter. That will take them back to the USS Mertha, and then we'll see the capsule towed back to the ship and brought aboard for the beginning process of the data collection, right?
That's exactly right. And you said potentially on the path to Mars. The President of the United States would remove the word potential. And you said we might see that in our lifetime. I suspect that if our health holds up, hopefully it does, that we will see that in our lifetime.
I hope so.
And that a lot of, particularly a lot of younger people watching this will play a hand in being the next generation of engineers who make that happen. And to that end, President Trump, I'm just looking at some of the posts that came down in his post that just came out a couple of moments ago. He states the entire trip was spectacular. The landing was perfect. Well, certainly that's true. And then he continues, we'll be doing this again and again. And then the next step, Mars, exclamation point. So that's reiterating the fact that this is part of a plan to go to the moon, to stay on the moon, and go far beyond the moon as well. And then you also have Prime Minister Mark Carney from Canada. He also issued congratulations for an historic feat of Artemis II. Of course, Canada very much part of this, with Jeremy Hansen being part of the crew, and his post concludes, welcome home. Those are just the first two I saw. I haven't had a chance to check out the others. You and I have been watching the feed here, but I suspect the feed is flowing with congratulations and a great deal of inspiration. And I just can't press the point enough that a lot of younger people, including many in school, who might be seeing this moment just as school kids saw the moment in 1968 of Apollo 8 and 1969 of Apollo 11, they got inspired to be the next generation of space pioneers and the engineers who build it and the dreamers who put it all together and think far beyond even the things you and I are talking about here.
Absolutely, and we had the director of the Museum of Science and Industries, Saunders Planetarium, on a little bit earlier this evening.
Yes.
And, you know, think about all the children that come through Mosey in Tampa that are watching this at home. Well, maybe a little bit late for them now, but watch the launch and they'll watch the next 2 or more launches and get interested. And, you know, this is how you end up with the next generation of astronauts, the next generation of people who will man mission control, the next generation of people who will help build rockets who are much more advanced than the ones that we just sent. So it's incredible to watch this all unfold, Craig.
It really is. And I didn't get to see that interview. Was it Dr. McKenna Wood you spoke to earlier?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I really enjoy speaking to her as well. She's an astrophysicist, and that's a very good example of when I spoke earlier, and I kind of caught myself because I didn't want to get too much in a rant, but I spoke to the role that physics plays in knowing exactly how this is all going to play out, because it's a matter of mathematics and working out the motions and the movements of objects with the ability to learn physics. And by the way, there has been some backsliding in that in the state of Florida and across the nation in students and student achievement in physics. If we were to regain lost momentum, and hopefully we will, and already moving in that direction, then we will be able to use that knowledge gained by the upcoming generations to move us so much further than what we even anticipate. And what we anticipate is really extraordinary in its own right. This is also a message to students today to pay attention to physics, to understand where physics can take you.
Absolutely. Craig, hey, listen, you've stayed on with us for the last hour, almost hour and a half. I appreciate you joining us. Your insight into space, your insight into the Artemis program, and just your personal accounts of being there and seeing it all unfold have been always fascinating. So I really appreciate you joining us tonight, Craig. Thanks so much.
Likewise. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Take care, Craig. Have a great night. And we're back out here live in the Fox 13 Plus set, and you have been watching live coverage of the Artemis splashing down in the Pacific. As we've mentioned, just for the last hour or so, the crew is doing well. All 4 astronauts are safe and healthy. Eventually, they will emerge from that capsule, and that's expected to happen at some point later on this evening. We're going to continue our live coverage over on Live Now, and after that, our evening newscast. But thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you again soon.
And we now have Reed Wiseman out of the vehicle, all 4 crew members now out of integrity. Once again, all 4 crew members now on the front porch. And the procedure to begin hoisting them up to these 2 Navy helicopters hovering overhead will begin shortly. This is Mission Control Houston. The mission is over, but the melody lingers on as jubilation continues here in the flight control room. We should be expecting NASA's Associate Administrator, Hamid Shatria, to be joining us shortly for a short interview while the recovery operations continue out in the Pacific. So we'll stand by for that. And then we'll turn it back over to Megan Cruz aboard the USS John P. Murtha.